You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That's what wrote nearly 2,000 years ago, and most people still don't understand how dangerous that idea really is. What if I told you that the moments when you do nothing, when you don't argue, don't react, don't explain yourself, don't defend your name, are often the exact moments your enemies lose the most power over you? What if the silence you think makes you weak is actually the force that unsettles them, exposes them, and slowly destroys their leverage? You've felt it before. Someone provokes you, tries to get a reaction, tries to pull you into drama, disrespect, or emotional chaos. And the instinct is to respond, to prove, to correct, to strike back. But every time you do, you hand them control. Stoicism teaches something far more ruthless. Restraint is not passive, it's strategic. Doing nothing at the right moment isn't avoidance. It's dominance through discipline. In this video, you'll learn 10 specific times when doing absolutely nothing quietly dismantles those who wish you harm, socially, psychologically, and emotionally. These aren't theories. These are timeless principles used by calm, unshakable men throughout history. Watch until the very end, because the final point ties everything together. And once you understand it, you'll never feel the urge to react the same way again. Number 1, when you refuse to react to provocation. When you refuse to react to provocation, something powerful happens inside you first, and that inner shift is what quietly dismantles the other side. Most people don't realize this because they've been trained to believe strength looks like response, defense, retaliation. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That line isn't poetic comfort, it's tactical. The moment you stop reacting on impulse, you remove yourself from the emotional leash someone else is trying to pull. Provocation only works when it lands. It needs friction. It needs you to tense up, to explain, to lash out, to justify yourself. When you do nothing, when you stay still internally, you deny it oxygen. Epictetus made this clear. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. When you refuse to react, you're refusing to accept the judgment that you've been threatened, diminished, or challenged. You're saying, without words, that your inner state is not available for manipulation. This is not weakness, it's discipline in its form. Reaction is easy. Anyone can snap back. Anyone can get loud. Anyone can feel offended. Doing nothing takes control. It takes restraint. It takes trust in your own grounding. When you don't react, you're not freezing, you're choosing. And choice is where your power lives. You have to understand this clearly. Provocation is an invitation to abandon your center, to step into someone else's emotional frame. When you accept that invitation, you're playing their game under their rules. When you refuse, the game collapses. The other side expected noise. They expected movement. They expected emotional confirmation. Silence disrupts that expectation. Calm destabilizes it. Seneca warned that anger always outpaces reason. The Stoics weren't telling you to suppress emotion. They were telling you to see it clearly before it drives you. When you feel the surge, the heat, the tightening, the urge to respond, that's your cue to pause, not forever, just long enough to reclaim authority over yourself. In that pause, you win something far more important than an argument. You win your autonomy. Refusing to react does mean you tolerate disrespect or surrender boundaries. It means you stop advertising where your buttons are. You stop giving free access to your emotional core. You act later if action is needed, from clarity instead of agitation. That difference is everything. One response leaks energy. The other concentrates it. There's also something deeply unsettling about a person who cannot be provoked. Not because they're cold, but because they're unreachable. When someone realizes they can't shake you, can't rush you, can't pull you into emotional chaos, the balance of power shifts. You're no longer predictable, and unpredictability when paired with calm is formidable. This is a habit you train, not a personality trait you wait for. Start small. The next time you feel the impulse to respond immediately, delay it. Count your breaths. Notice the sensations without naming them good or bad. Reminded himself that you can leave the scene not physically but mentally at any time. You step back into observation. You watch the urge rise and fall. And when it passes, you'll notice something subtle. The situation lost urgency. Another exercise is to rehearse non-reaction in advance. The Stoics believed in preparation of the mind. You don't wait for provocation to practice calm. You decide ahead of time that your peace is non-negotiable. You remind yourself that no external behavior has the authority to command your inner state. When the moment comes, you're not improvising. You're executing a decision already made. You also train this through selective engagement. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every comment requires acknowledgement. Not every challenge needs an answer. Seneca wrote that life is long enough if you know how to use it. Wasting energy on provocation shortens it. When you refuse to react, you're reclaiming time, focus, and clarity. What's important is that your stillness isn't empty. It's full of intention. You're not numb. You're grounded. You're not afraid. You're sovereign. The goal isn't to appear unbothered. The goal is to actually be unbothered. Over time, this changes how you see yourself. You start trusting your ability to remain steady. You stop fearing confrontation because you know you won't lose yourself inside it. You don't need to dominate the moment. You let it pass. And in letting it pass, you outlast it. So practice doing nothing deliberately. Practice pausing when provoked. Practice letting silence do the work your ego used to do. Practice choosing dignity over impulse. The Stoics knew that the most decisive victories are internal. When you refuse to react, you're not just avoiding conflict. You're mastering yourself. And that, quietly and inevitably, dismantles anything that tries to control you. Number 2, when you stay silent instead of defending yourself. When you stay silent instead of defending yourself, something unsettling happens to the other side. They expected movement, resistance, noise. They expected you to explain, justify, clarify, or collapse into reaction. Silence denies them all of it, and that denial is not weakness, it's control. The Stoics understood this deeply, reminded himself that it's often better to leave wrongs unspoken, not because they don't matter, but because your peace matters more. Silence isn't absence. It's restraint in its most disciplined form. You've been conditioned to believe that silence equals surrender, that if you don't speak up, you lose. But that belief was installed by people who benefit from your emotional labor. When you rush to defend yourself, you hand over your composure. You reveal where you're sensitive. You show what can be pulled. Epictetus warned that if someone can provoke you, they control you. Silence cuts that control at the root. You don't deny the accusation. You deny it oxygen. There's a strange confidence that grows when you stop explaining yourself. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Your mind wants to jump in to fix the narrative, to correct misunderstandings. That impulse is ego trying to protect an image. Stoicism invites you to let the image burn if it must, because your character isn't built in arguments, it's built in conduct. Seneca wrote that a good character is its own defense. When you understand that, words become optional. Silence works because it creates asymmetry. The other side is emotionally invested. You're not. They're spending energy. You're conserving it. They're escalating. You're still. This imbalance destabilizes them far more than any clever response ever could. You don't need to win the conversation. You need to win your inner state. Once that's intact, everything else rearranges itself. Doing nothing doesn't mean feeling nothing. It means you don't outsource your reactions. You allow the surge of emotion to rise, peak, and fall without expression. This is a skill, a trained one, practiced reminding himself that external opinions cannot touch the ruling faculty of the mind unless invited. Silence is how you refuse the invitation. When you defend yourself, you implicitly accept the frame that you're on trial. Silence rejects the trial entirely. You're not required to respond to every provocation. You're not obligated to clarify yourself to people who aren't committed to understanding. The Stoics were ruthless about this. They didn't argue with noise. They lived above it. You can train this. Start small. When the urge to respond appears, pause, not dramatically, just enough to notice it, label it. That urge is not truth, it's habit. Then choose stillness. This doesn't mean bottling emotions. It means letting them move through you without spilling outward. Over time, this rewires your nervous system. You become harder to shake because you're no longer reactive by default. Another exercise is to practice selective speech. Before responding, ask yourself one question. Does speaking here increase my clarity or dilute it? If the answer isn't clear, you wait. Silence sharpens perception. It forces you to listen, to observe patterns, to see intentions more clearly. People reveal themselves when you stop interrupting them with your defenses. There's also power in refusing to correct every misunderstanding. Most misunderstandings resolve themselves when you don't interfere. Some don't. That's fine. Stoicism teaches you that reputation is external. Character is internal. You protect what's internal first. Everything else is negotiable. Silence dismantles enemies because it deprives them of feedback. No reaction means no reward, no escalation, no drama. Their effort collapses inward. Meanwhile, you stay intact, calm, grounded, unmoved. This is not passivity, it's strategic patience, the kind that wears others down without lifting a finger. Make silence a deliberate practice. Choose moments each day where you say less than you could, where you resist the need to clarify, where you allow discomfort to exist without rushing to soothe it with words. This builds an unshakable core, a quiet authority. You'll notice something shift. Your words become heavier because they're rarer. Your presence becomes steadier because it's not reactive. And the people who once tried to provoke you lose interest. Not because you fought them, but because there was nothing left to fight. As wrote, the best way to deal with insults is to not be the kind of person they can injure. Silence is how you become that person. Number 3, when you don't chase validation or approval. When you don't chase validation or approval, something subtle but devastating happens. You remove the very fuel that keeps hostility alive. Most conflicts are not sustained by power, intelligence, or strategy. They're sustained by attention, by reaction, by the need to be seen, acknowledged, corrected, admired, or justified. The moment you stop feeding that need, the dynamic collapses on its own. This is why doing nothing, when done consciously, can be more destructive than confrontation. Epictetus said it cleanly. If you want to be invincible, make sure that no one can hurt you by praise or blame. Read that slowly. Anxiety fades when approval stops being your currency. So does the grip others think they have on you. Validation seeking is invisible bondage. It trains your nervous system to scan the room, the response, the silence. You start adjusting yourself to fit expectations that were never agreed upon. When you step out of that pattern, you don't become cold, you become unreachable. Not emotionally distant, but internally sealed. You stop explaining yourself. You stop correcting assumptions. You stop performing clarity for people committed to misunderstanding you. And that restraint unsettles those who rely on your reaction to feel powerful. Doing nothing here isn't weakness, it's refusal. The Stoics understood that dignity comes from self-sufficiency of judgment, wrote that it is possible to live well even in a palace or a prison, because the mind is its own domain. When you stop outsourcing your self-worth, approval loses its leverage. Criticism loses its sting. Silence becomes neutral instead of threatening, and the people who expected you to bend, defend, or chase suddenly find themselves talking into a void. That void is unbearable for those who thrive on response. This is where your power actually sharpens. You realize that you don't need to win arguments to win position. You don't need to be liked to be respected. You don't need agreement to remain steady. When approval no longer guides your behavior, your actions become cleaner, more deliberate, less reactive. You stop giving explanations that weaken your posture. You stop over-communicating to manage perceptions. Seneca warned that he who seeks applause is already defeated. The man who doesn't need it moves freely. Doing nothing in this context means holding your frame without reinforcement. You don't rush to clarify your intent. You don't chase closure. You let people sit with their interpretations. This is deeply uncomfortable for anyone who expects you to perform emotional labor for them. And that discomfort is not your responsibility. When you remain calm and unmoved, tension has nowhere to go. It turns inward. That's why silence, when grounded, is disruptive. You train this habit deliberately. You start by noticing the impulse to explain yourself. Not the words, the urge. That itch to be understood immediately, to correct, to soften, to win back approval. Each time you resist acting on that impulse, you strengthen your internal spine. You don't suppress the urge. You observe it and let it pass. This rewires your response system. You teach your mind that safety doesn't depend on validation. Another practice is to limit how often you mentally rehearse conversations. If you catch yourself replaying imagined judgments, you stop and return to the present. Reminded himself that other people's opinions exist only in their minds, not in reality. You don't need to manage what isn't real. This mental restraint is a form of doing nothing, and it's powerful. When approval no longer governs you, your presence changes. You're slower to react, more grounded, less readable. People sense that you won't be pulled into unnecessary exchanges. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you selective. You choose engagement instead of being baited into it. And those who once relied on your emotional responses lose influence without a single word spoken. There's a deeper shift that happens too. You stop measuring yourself against others. Comparison fades because it's fueled by validation hunger. When that hunger is gone, competition becomes irrelevant. You're no longer trying to prove superiority or defend worth. You're simply operating from alignment. Epictetus said that freedom is secured not by the fulfillment of desire, but by the removal of it. Approval-seeking is desire dressed as virtue. Remove it, and your mind clears. This kind of stillness frustrates people who expect reaction as confirmation of their impact. They mistake your silence for weakness briefly. Then confusion sets in. Why aren't you responding? Why aren't you explaining? Why aren't you adjusting? And that confusion erodes their confidence. You didn't confront them. You didn't retaliate. You simply the energy that sustained the dynamic. To strengthen this further, practice deliberate non-response in low-stakes situations. Not avoidance, restraint. Let pauses exist. Let silence do its work. You'll notice discomfort arise in you at first. That's the habit breaking. Stay with it. Breathe. Let the discomfort dissolve without action. This builds emotional insulation. Over time, the urge to chase approval weakens. You also redefine success internally. Instead of asking, "Was I liked?" you ask, "Was I aligned?" Instead of "Did they approve?" you ask, "Did I act with clarity?" This reframing shifts your center of gravity inward. You become less manipulable because there's nothing external to pull on. Seneca wrote that the wise man is content with himself. That contentment is not arrogance, it's armor. Doing nothing doesn't mean indifference to values. It means refusing to perform for those who don't share them. It means conserving energy for what actually matters. When you stop chasing validation, You remove yourself from games designed to drain you. And when you're no longer playing, those games collapse. So start now. Notice the pull. Resist the explanation. Sit in the silence. Let approval come or not come. It no longer defines you. This quiet discipline will change how you move through the world. And without raising your voice, without proving anything, you'll find that the absence of your reaction is more powerful than any response ever was. Number 4, when you let time expose false intentions. When you let time expose false intentions, you step into one of the most underestimated forms of power Stoicism offers. You don't rush. You do confront. You don't correct the narrative. You simply refuse to interfere with reality doing its job. And reality is relentless. False intentions can survive pressure, but they collapse under duration. That's why reminded himself to stay still and let things reveal themselves. Not everything requires your involvement. Some things only require your patience. You've been conditioned to believe that strength means response, that silence is weakness, that inaction is surrender. Stoicism flips that illusion. It teaches you that restraint is often the higher form of action. Epictetus was clear. If someone acts badly, it harms them, not you, unless you choose to be harmed by reacting. When you do nothing, you remove the fuel. You stop feeding distortion with attention. And without attention, false intentions begin to rot on their own. Time is merciless to inconsistency. A person pretending, manipulating, or acting from hidden motives cannot maintain coherence forever. Their words drift from their actions. Their emotions betray their scripts. Their patience thins. You don't need to expose them. You let them exhaust themselves. Seneca warned against the urge to immediately strike back because haste reveals insecurity. Waiting, on the other hand, reveals clarity. You are not passive during this waiting. You are observant. You are steady. You are allowing patterns to surface. Doing nothing here doesn't mean indifference. It means discipline. It means you resist the impulse to defend your image, correct assumptions, or force resolution. You trust that truth has weight, and weight takes time to settle. When you stay still, others are forced to move, and movement reveals intent. People show who they are when they think no one is reacting. Silence removes the mask. This is where your mind needs training. The discomfort of not acting can feel unbearable at first. Your ego wants closure. Your emotions want validation. But Stoicism asks you to rise above both. Wrote that you don't have to turn this into something. You can let it go. That sentence alone is a mental release valve. You stop converting every situation into a battle. You conserve energy. You gain perspective. A practical exercise here is intentional delay. When something triggers you, you impose a waiting period before responding. Not minutes, hours, sometimes days. During that time, you watch. You don't ruminate. You observe. Notice how narratives shift without your interference. Notice how people reveal more when they think the moment has passed. This trains emotional endurance, which is far rarer than emotional expression. Another practice is silent evaluation. You stop judging intentions based on words and start tracking consistency. Not obsessively, calmly. You don't confront contradictions. You let them stack. Over time, the picture becomes undeniable. And when truth is undeniable, you don't need to argue. The situation resolves itself, often without you saying a single word. Doing nothing also protects your character. When you react prematurely, you risk mirroring the very behavior you despise. Stoicism warns against this trap. The goal is not to defeat others, but to remain intact. When you let time expose false intentions, you stay clean. Your actions remain measured. Your conscience stays light. That alone is a victory most people never experience. There's a deeper layer here. Time doesn't just expose others, it exposes you. Your impatience, your need to be seen as right, your attachment to outcome. This is where the real work happens. You practice stillness not to punish others, but to master yourself. Epictetus said that freedom is not getting what you want but wanting what happens. When you accept the unfolding, anxiety loosens its grip. You'll notice something subtle as you practice this. Your presence changes. You become harder to manipulate because you don't react on cue. You become harder to provoke because you're not hungry for immediate resolution. This unsettles those with false intentions. They rely on predictability. Silence disrupts their strategy. So adopt this habit deliberately. The next time you feel pulled to explain, pause. The next time you feel accused, wait. The next time you feel misunderstood, stay composed. Not forever. Just long enough for reality to speak louder than you ever could. Trust the process. Trust time. The Stoics did, not because they were passive, but because they understood that truth, given enough space, always steps forward on its own. Doing nothing isn't weakness. It's strategic patience. And patience, practiced consistently, dismantles falsehood without confrontation. Number 5. When you remain calm during their emotional outbursts. When you remain calm during their emotional outbursts, you step into a position of quiet dominance without lifting a finger. Most people don't realize this because they've been trained to believe power looks like volume, speed, and reaction. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That line isn't poetic decoration. It's a tactical truth. When someone loses control and you don't follow them into chaos, the imbalance is immediately felt. Not externally at first, but internally where it hurts most. An emotional outburst is an invitation. It's an attempt to pull you into their state, to make you mirror their agitation, their anger, their instability. When you accept the invitation, you validate it. When you refuse by doing nothing, you deny them oxygen. Calmness isn't weakness here, it's containment. You're showing, without saying a word, that their emotions do not govern you. And that realization destabilizes them far more than confrontation ever could. Epictetus was ruthless about this point. He warned that if you allow someone to control your emotional state, you hand them authority over your life. Every outburst is a test of sovereignty. Will you surrender your inner order to their disorder, or will you stay anchored? When you remain calm, you're not suppressing anything. You're exercising choice. You're deciding that their storm does not deserve residence in your mind. What makes this so effective is that emotional volatility feeds on reaction. Outbursts want resistance, fear, submission, or escalation. Calm offers none of these. Calm is an empty room, and in that emptiness, the other person is forced to confront themselves. Their intensity has nowhere to land, no friction, no payoff. That moment when their emotional momentum collapses is when the real shift occurs. This is why Stoics trained themselves to slow down internally. Repeatedly reminded himself that the mind becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you let another person's emotional excess paint your inner world, you live in their palette. Calmness keeps your canvas clean. It preserves your clarity, and clarity is power. There's also a deeper psychological effect at play. When you stay composed, you reverse the expected hierarchy. Emotional people expect control through pressure. Your stillness removes that leverage. You're no longer reacting, you're observing. You're no longer inside the exchange, you're above it. Seneca said that anger, if not restrained, is often more harmful to us than the injury that provoked it. Calmness is restraint in motion. You build this ability deliberately. It doesn't happen by accident. One daily exercise is mental labeling. When an emotional surge approaches, yours or someone else's, you name it internally. This is anger. This is agitation. Numbing creates distance. Distance restores choice. Another practice is controlled breathing, slow and deliberate, not to relax but to signal to your nervous system that there is no emergency. This keeps your body from betraying your mind. You also practice silence. Not passive silence, but intentional quiet. You resist the urge to correct, defend, or dominate the moment. Advised asking yourself whether something is necessary before engaging. Most reactions are not. Silence in the face of chaos communicates stability more clearly than words ever could. Over time, this habit reshapes you. You become harder to provoke. Not numb, disciplined. Not detached, centered. People sense this shift. They feel that emotional manipulation won't work, that escalation won't move you, that drama finds no foothold. And because of that, the power dynamic quietly tilts. Doing nothing in these moments is not inaction, it's refusal. Refusal to be pulled off-center. Refusal to surrender inner order. Refusal to participate in unnecessary conflict. This refusal doesn't shout. It doesn't posture. It simply stands firm. And firmness without aggression is unsettling to those who rely on emotional force. So train it. Start small. Delay responses. Sit with discomfort instead of neutralizing it immediately. Remind yourself, as Epictetus did, that events themselves do not disturb you, your judgments about them do. When you remove judgment, calm emerges naturally. When you remain calm during emotional outbursts, you don't win by defeating anyone. You win by remaining intact. And that, paradoxically, is what dismantles opposition most effectively. Because nothing frustrates chaos more than order that refuses to break. Number 6, when you focus on self-mastery instead of revenge. When you focus on self-mastery instead of revenge, something quiet but devastating begins to happen, and it doesn't look like victory at first. It looks like restraint. It looks like stillness. It looks like you choosing not to react when every instinct tells you to strike back. But this is exactly where the Stoics found their power. Wrote, "The best way to avenge yourself is not to become like the wrongdoer." That line isn't poetic comfort, it's strategy. Revenge keeps you psychologically tethered to the very person you claim to despise. Self-mastery cuts the cord. You don't suffer because someone acted against you. You suffer because your mind keeps returning to it, replaying it, sharpening it, feeding it with emotion. Revenge feels tempting because it promises closure, but it never delivers. It extends the conflict internally, even if it ends externally. When you choose self-mastery, you stop volunteering your mental space to someone who has already shown they don't deserve it. That decision alone reclaims authority over your inner world. Stoicism teaches that your real enemy is not outside you. Epictetus was relentless about this. He warned that if you allow others to disturb your peace, you've handed them power without resistance. Self-mastery begins the moment you refuse to let external behavior dictate your internal state. This doesn't make you weak. It makes you unreachable. When there's nothing to provoke, nothing to manipulate, nothing to hook into emotionally, the conflict collapses on its own. Doing nothing doesn't mean you do nothing internally. You're working constantly. You're training your attention. You're disciplining your reactions. You're sharpening your judgment. While others burn energy plotting, explaining, justifying, you're consolidating strength. Seneca warned that anger, when left unchecked, punishes the one who feels it more than the one who caused it. By choosing self-mastery, you refuse self-inflicted damage. There's also a deeper shift that happens. When you stop seeking revenge, you stop defining yourself as a victim. Revenge requires an identity built around being wronged. Self-mastery dissolves that identity. You stop narrating yourself as someone who needs to get even and start living as someone who governs himself. That psychological upgrade is irreversible. Once you've tasted internal command, the urge to retaliate starts to feel beneath you, not morally, but energetically. This is where doing nothing becomes dangerous for those who expect a reaction. Your silence forces reality to speak for itself. Your absence removes the drama that fuels conflict. Your composure exposes the emptiness of provocation. Reminded himself that other people's actions belong to them, not to you. When you fully accept that, revenge loses its emotional charge. You're no longer trying to correct the world. You're correcting your relationship with it. Self-mastery requires practice, not theory. One exercise is deliberate delay. When the impulse to react arises, you pause not for seconds but for hours if necessary. You let the emotional spike pass without expression. This trains your nervous system to tolerate discomfort without action. Another exercise is mental reframing. Instead of asking, "How do I get back at this?" you ask, "What is this teaching me about control?" That single question redirects energy inward, where it actually belongs. You also strengthen self-mastery by reducing mental rumination. Each time your mind returns to the offense, you notice it and redirect attention to something constructive: your breath, your posture, your next disciplined action. Not distraction, redirection. Over time, the mind learns that revenge fantasies are unproductive noise. The emotional charge fades because it's no longer rewarded with attention. There's a reason the Stoics emphasized character over outcome. You can't control whether others feel guilt, regret, or loss, but you can control whether you become reactive, bitter, or consumed. And here's the quiet truth: when you master yourself, you become immune to the psychological games that revenge keeps alive. You don't need validation. You don't need acknowledgement. You don't need apology. That independence is unsettling to those who thrive on reaction. Seneca once wrote that a wise man is satisfied with himself. That satisfaction is lethal to conflict. It starves it. When you're internally complete, external hostility has nowhere to land. Doing nothing externally while doing the work internally shifts the entire power dynamic. You're no longer playing the same game. So adopt the habit of inward dominance. Train restraint as a skill. Practice emotional neutrality. Reduce impulsive speech. Remove yourself from unnecessary mental battles. Each act of self-control compounds. Each moment you choose mastery over reaction strengthens the part of you that cannot be shaken. Revenge seeks to wound. Self-mastery ends the war. And the more you practice it, the clearer it becomes. The most devastating response was never retaliation. It was becoming untouchable. Number 7. When you walk away without explanation. When you walk away without explanation, something profound happens inside you first. Before it affects anyone else, it reorganizes your inner world. Most people feel compelled to justify themselves, to clarify, to correct misunderstandings, to defend their intentions. Stoicism challenges that impulse at its root. Wrote that you don't need to turn this into something. It already is what it is. Walking away without explanation is not avoidance. It's discernment. It's the moment you decide that your energy is finite, and not everyone is entitled to it. The urge to explain comes from ego disguised as fairness. You want to be seen accurately. You want the other person to get it. But Stoic wisdom asks you to look closer. Why do you need their understanding to move on? Epictetus warned that if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Silence tests that lesson immediately. When you walk away without explanation, you step out of the emotional marketplace where reactions are traded like currency. You refuse to bargain with your peace. This is where doing nothing becomes powerful, not passive, not weak, intentional. You are not ignoring, you are choosing not to engage. There's a difference. When you stop explaining, you stop feeding narratives that were never yours to control. You allow others to sit with their assumptions. That discomfort does more work than any argument ever could. Seneca wrote that the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Silence is the ultimate delay. It removes fuel. Without resistance, hostility collapses under its own weight. Walking away without explanation also trains you. It strengthens emotional self-command. You learn to tolerate being misunderstood without rushing to fix it. That's not easy. The mind wants closure. It wants resolution. But Stoicism teaches you that closure is internal, not negotiated. You don't need agreement to move forward. You don't need permission to disengage. When you walk away calmly, without drama or final words, you reclaim authorship of your attention. This choice disrupts expectations. People expect reactions, they expect defense, they expect emotional labor. When none arrives, it forces reflection. Silence becomes a mirror. You are no longer part of the cycle, and that's why this act destroys opposition, not through aggression but through absence. There's nothing to push against. No friction, no escalation, just space. You might feel tempted to explain yourself just once, to clear the air, to leave a final statement. Notice that impulse. It's usually fear wearing logic's clothes, fear of being misjudged, fear of losing control of the story. Reminded himself that other people's opinions are external events, outside your command. The moment you accept that, walking away becomes lighter. You don't storm off. You don't announce your exit. You simply stop participating. This doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. Stoicism isn't numbness, it's order. You process internally what you would otherwise leak externally. You write it down, you breathe through it. You let the emotional surge pass before acting. One practical exercise is deliberate pause. When you feel the urge to explain, delay your response by a fixed amount of time. Minutes at first, then hours, then days. Often, the need dissolves on its own. Another exercise is rehearsing silence. Imagine situations where you choose not to respond, not out of spite but clarity. You're training your nervous system to understand that safety doesn't depend on being heard. This builds resilience. Over time, your mind stops equating silence with loss. It starts associating it with strength. Walking away without explanation also sharpens your boundaries. You stop over-investing in dynamics that drain you. You stop trying to manage other people's perceptions. That's a heavy burden to carry. Seneca said we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Much of that suffering comes from imagined judgments. Silence cuts through that illusion. You let go of imagined courtrooms and imagined verdicts. There will be moments when silence feels uncomfortable. Let it. Discomfort is not danger. Sit with it. Observe it. This is how you build inner authority. The authority to decide when engagement is worth it and when it's wasteful. Over time, you'll notice a shift. You'll speak less but with more intent. You'll react less but with more precision. You'll move on faster, cleaner, without dragging emotional residue behind you. Doing nothing here is not weakness. It's alignment with Stoic reason. You act according to what preserves your character, not what satisfies your ego. Wrote that the best way to avenge yourself is to not become like the wrongdoer. Silence accomplishes that. You don't mirror chaos. You don't amplify conflict. You remain intact. So practice it. Start small. Choose one moment where you would normally explain and don't. Breathe. Let the moment pass. Notice that the world doesn't collapse. Your worth doesn't diminish. In fact, something else grows: self-respect. And once that becomes your baseline, walking away without explanation stops feeling like loss. It feels like freedom. Doing nothing, when done deliberately, is not empty. It's full of intention. And that intention reshapes you long before it affects anyone else. Number 8. When you allow people to reveal themselves without interruption. When you allow people to reveal themselves without interruption, you step into a form of power that most never develop because it feels counterintuitive. The instinct is always to react, to correct, to defend, to explain. Your ego wants motion. Your emotions want release. But Stoicism teaches something far more lethal to opposition: stillness. Wrote that the best way to avenge yourself is not to become like the one who wronged you. Doing nothing is often the most disciplined action available, because it denies others the friction they need to mask who they really are. When you stay silent, you remove the obstacle that allows people to hide behind your reactions. Interruption gives them cover, debate gives them structure, emotional responses give them excuses. Silence gives them space, and in that space, patterns emerge. People begin to talk more than they should. They overextend. They contradict themselves. They expose intentions without realizing it. You don't have to interrogate. You don't have to confront. You simply don't interfere with the unfolding. This is not weakness. This is observation sharpened into strategy. Your mind becomes calmer the moment you stop feeling responsible for correcting others. Anxiety fades when you realize that truth doesn't need your urgency. Epictetus reminded us that it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Doing nothing strips judgment down to perception. You see clearly when you stop trying to manage outcomes. You stop burning energy on unnecessary defense. You stop volunteering explanations to people who aren't seeking understanding. And in that restraint, you gain leverage, not over them, but over yourself. People reveal themselves fastest when they believe they're unchallenged. When there's no resistance, no immediate consequence, no emotional reward from provoking you. Silence removes the feedback loop. Without interruption, their words continue. Their behavior continues. And consistency is the great revealer. You don't need to label. You don't need to accuse. What's repeated eventually becomes undeniable, even to those watching quietly from the edges. This is where doing nothing quietly dismantles opposition. You are no longer a participant in their performance. You become an audience of one, attentive and unmoved. Seneca warned that the wise man does not fight every battle offered to him. Most conflicts are traps disguised as opportunities to prove yourself. When you decline to engage, you deny others the stage they need. Their energy turns inward. Their contradictions surface. Their impatience grows. You remain steady. There is also a deeper internal benefit. When you practice non-interruption, you train your nervous system to tolerate discomfort. Silence can feel unbearable at first. Your mind will itch to speak, to clarify, to control perception. Resist that urge. That urge is where weakness hides. The Stoics knew that mastery begins with endurance, not physical endurance, but psychological restraint. You don't act because you can. You act because it's necessary, and often it is. To build this habit, you practice intentional pauses. When provoked, count breaths before responding. When tempted to explain, wait. When misunderstood, stay still. This isn't avoidance, it's selection. You are choosing not to interfere with the process of revelation. Over time, this trains you to separate impulse from intention. You stop reacting automatically. You start responding deliberately or not at all. Another exercise is silent observation. For a set period, you commit to listening without inserting yourself. You don't correct inaccuracies. You don't redirect the conversation. You don't seek validation. You just listen. This sharpens discernment. You begin to hear subtext. You notice tone shifts. You recognize repetition. Information accumulates when you stop interrupting the flow. Doing nothing also protects your dignity. When you don't rush to defend yourself, you communicate something powerful without saying a word. You are not threatened. Reminded himself that if something is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Silence aligns perfectly with that principle. You don't need to win arguments when time will expose inconsistencies on your behalf. This approach requires trust. Trust in your perception, trust in patience, trust that not every moment demands action. That trust is what most people lack, which is why they reveal themselves so quickly. They rush. They overreact. They speak to fill the void. You don't. You let the void do the work. As you adopt this habit, you'll notice something subtle but transformative. You feel less reactive, less drained, less entangled. You're no longer dragged into other people's emotional storms. You stand outside of them, watching the patterns form. Doing nothing becomes an act of clarity. And clarity is devastating to those who rely on confusion to maintain control. So practice stillness, practice restraint, let silence stretch, let people continue, let time accumulate evidence. You don't need to expose anyone. You don't need to confront. When you allow people to reveal themselves without interruption, you remove the mask simply by refusing to touch it. And in that refusal, you gain something far more valuable than victory. You gain composure, insight, and unshakable self-command. Number 9. When you maintain composure while they seek control. When you maintain composure while they seek control, something subtle but devastating happens beneath the surface. Control depends on reaction. It feeds on emotional leakage, on visible disturbance, on the sense that they can move you even slightly off-center. The moment you don't react, the entire dynamic collapses, not loudly, quietly. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That line isn't poetic fluff, it's tactical. It reveals a psychological truth most people never learn. Composure starves manipulation. When you stay still inside while someone is reaching for dominance, you deny them oxygen. You're conditioned to believe that power requires response. That silence is weakness. That doing nothing means losing ground. Stoicism dismantles that belief. Epictetus was relentless about this. If something is outside your control, it has no authority over you unless you grant it permission. Composure is that refusal. You don't argue, you don't correct, you don't rush to explain, you don't mirror their urgency. You remain grounded, and in doing so, you force them to confront their own instability. They wanted to pull you into motion. You stayed still. That imbalance exposes them. There is immense discipline in doing nothing, not passive nothing, conscious nothing. You are present, you are aware, but you are not reactive. Most people mistake restraint for fear because they've never practiced it, but restraint is an act of dominance over yourself. Seneca wrote that the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, hanging on tomorrow, losing today. When someone seeks control, they are trying to control the future through you. Your reaction is the bridge they want to cross. When you don't give it to them, they're stranded. Composure shifts the battlefield inward. Instead of competing on their terms, emotion, urgency, escalation, you anchor yourself in reason. And reason doesn't hurry, it observes, it waits, it chooses. This is deeply unsettling to someone who thrives on control. They expect resistance or submission. Calm gives them neither. It creates a void where their tactics fail to land. You train this by learning to pause, not just externally but internally. When pressure appears, you don't label it as a threat. You label it as information. You watch your impulses rise, the urge to speak, to defend, to assert, and you let them pass without action. This is not suppression, it's mastery. Reminded himself that you can leave other people's mistakes where they belong, on their side. You don't need to carry them in your nervous system. Another practice is intentional non-engagement. When you feel provoked, you ask yourself a simple question. Is a response required, or is it merely requested? Most control attempts are requests disguised as demands. Silence, calm posture, neutral expression, these are not empty gestures. They are boundaries. They communicate that access to your emotions is not automatic. Doing nothing also means refusing to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Explanation often feels virtuous, but it can be a trap. The Stoics warned against trying to correct every false impression. You are not obligated to manage someone else's perception. When you stop performing clarity for those who seek leverage, you reclaim your time and your authority. Composure has a compounding effect. The more you practice it, the more your nervous system learns that not every stimulus requires a response. You become harder to rush, harder to bait, harder to destabilize, and people sense this long before they understand it. Calm is intimidating because it suggests self-sufficiency. You don't need to win the moment. You're not desperate to be right. You're steady. One powerful exercise is deliberate stillness. Sit with discomfort without narrating it. No internal commentary, no mental rehearsal, just sensation and breath. This conditions you to remain present under pressure, Another is selective speech. Decide in advance that you will not speak unless your words improve the situation, not express, improve. This immediately filters out reactive noise. When you maintain composure while others seek control, you're not playing their game. You're ending it, quietly. You don't need to overpower. You don't need to dominate. You simply refuse to be moved. And that refusal is more destructive to manipulative intent than any confrontation ever could be. So practice doing nothing, but do it deliberately. Build the habit of pause. Train your mind to stay seated while others pace. Let your calm become your default. In a world addicted to reaction, composure isn't just strength, it's sovereignty. Number 10, when you succeed quietly and deny them attention. When you succeed quietly and deny them attention, something subtle but devastating happens. You step out of the game they desperately need you to play. Most hostility survives on reaction. It feeds on friction, acknowledgement, resistance. The Stoics understood this deeply. Reminded himself that the best way to deal with insult was not to be disturbed by it at all, not to counterattack, not to explain, just to continue. That calm continuation is not weakness. It's a withdrawal of fuel. And without fuel, even the loudest fire dies. You feel the urge to respond because your ego wants symmetry. If someone pushes, you want to push back. If they undermine, you want to correct the record. But Stoicism teaches you to pause and ask a sharper question. Does my attention improve my position, or does it lower me to theirs? Epictetus warned that when you are offended, it is not the action itself that disturbs you, but your judgment about it. When you stop feeding that judgment, you reclaim your mental ground. Silence becomes strategic. Stillness becomes action. Quiet success unsettles people because it removes comparison. When you stop narrating your progress, stop seeking validation, stop broadcasting intent, others lose their reference point. They can't measure themselves against you. They can't provoke you into revealing insecurity. You become unreadable. Seneca wrote that the greatest obstacle to living is expectation. The same applies here. When others expect reaction and receive none, they're forced to sit with their own restlessness. That discomfort does the work for you. Doing nothing doesn't mean being passive. It means being selective. You redirect energy away from performance and toward progress. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop correcting narratives that don't matter. Instead, you build quietly. You sharpen privately. You let outcomes speak in a language that requires no translation. This is discipline disguised as indifference. What truly dismantles opposition is not your response, but your absence from their emotional economy. When you deny attention, you deny significance. And when you succeed without acknowledgement, you deny relevance. That combination is unbearable to those who thrive on reaction. Advised to live a good life, and if there are gods, they will reward you. If there are none, you will still have lived nobly. Apply that here. Act rightly, not loudly. Improve steadily, not theatrically. This approach requires restraint, and restraint is a muscle. You train it by delaying response. When provoked, wait. Let the initial surge pass. Most impulses collapse under a little time. Another exercise is attention budgeting. Decide in advance what deserves your focus and what does not. Write it down if you must. When something tries to pull you into unnecessary conflict, you return to the list. This builds internal authority. You're no longer reactive, you're governed. You also practice anonymity and effort. Do the work without announcing it. Let silence protect momentum. The Stoics valued self-sufficiency not because they despised others, but because dependence weakens judgment. When you don't need applause, you don't fear silence. And when your mind is free from that fear, you move faster and cleaner. There's a paradox here. The less you try to defeat anyone, the more their power over you fades. Seneca observed that anger, if not restrained, is more harmful to us than the injury that provokes it. Attention works the same way. What you starve cannot dominate you. When you refuse to react, you're not avoiding conflict, you're ending it at the root. So adopt the habit of non-response where response is unnecessary. Replace commentary with construction. Replace signaling with substance. Each time you choose silence over spectacle, you strengthen your position. Each time you let progress remain quiet, you protect it from interference. This isn't about being above others. It's about being beyond reach. You don't need to prove anything when your direction is clear. You don't need to win arguments when your life is moving forward. Do nothing deliberately. Let your calm be uninviting. Let your success be private. In that space, free from noise and reaction, you'll find what the Stoics promised all along: power that doesn't need permission and peace that no enemy can touch. Before you go, remember this: the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice. Doing nothing was never about weakness. It was about mastery. Every time you chose silence over impulse, patience over reaction, and discipline over ego, you took control of the one thing your enemies can never touch: your inner state. While they waited for you to react, to stumble, to explain yourself, you stayed grounded. And that calm, it unsettles them more than any confrontation ever could. Most people fight battles they never needed to enter. You didn't. You conserved your energy. You refused to be dragged into chaos. And in doing so, you let time, truth, and consistency do the work on your behalf. That's why stillness is so powerful. It exposes insecurity, exhausts aggression, and leaves manipulation with nothing to feed on. If this video shifted the way you see conflict, ego, and power, don't let it stop here. Rewatch it. Let each point sink in. Apply it the next time life tries to provoke you. And if you want to continue building unshakable Stoic strength, make sure you stay with this channel, because what's coming next will sharpen your mind even further. Stay calm, stay disciplined. And remember, silence, when chosen deliberately, is dominance. You always own the option of having no opinion. What if I told you that most of the damage in your life didn't come from what others did, but from the moments you spoke when silence would have protected your power? You felt it before. You explain yourself to someone who already decided not to understand. You defend your truth to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You react and instantly regret giving them access to your emotions. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is restraint, and restraint is dominance. In a world addicted to instant reactions, the man who can pause, who can hold his tongue while others expose theirs, quietly rises above the noise. Karma doesn't need your help. It only needs time. And when you stop interfering with emotional responses, life has a strange way of speaking for you louder than any argument ever could. This video will show you 10 precise moments when staying silent is not passive, but strategic. Moments where words would cost you respect, peace, or leverage. Moments where silence lets truth surface on its own. Watch this till the very end, not casually, intentionally. Because if you miss even one of these moments, you may keep repeating mistakes that drain your confidence, your clarity, and your self-respect. Silence, when used correctly, changes everything. Number 1, when someone is trying to provoke you emotionally. There is a moment that arrives again and again in your life, sometimes quietly, sometimes with force, the moment when someone tries to pull you out of yourself. They poke. They insinuate, they twist words. They apply pressure not to understand you but to move you, emotionally, off your center. And in that moment, silence feels unnatural, even threatening, because everything in you wants to respond, correct, defend, strike back, or prove something. This is exactly the moment Stoicism asks you to pause. Not because you are weak, but because this is where strength is tested. The Stoics understood provocation deeply. Epictetus put it plainly: If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these." That is not sarcasm. That is sovereignty. When someone is trying to provoke you emotionally, they are not interested in truth. They are interested in reaction. And the moment you give it, you hand them control. Provocation works only when you believe you must respond to preserve your worth. Silence breaks that illusion. Silence says, "I do not need to explain myself to remain whole." Most people react because they confuse emotional discharge with strength. But strength is restraint. Strength is choosing not to be dragged into someone else's internal chaos. Reminded himself, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." That line alone can save you years of unnecessary conflict. When someone tries to provoke you, they are testing your boundaries, whether consciously or not. They want to see if they can reach inside you and shake something loose. Anger, insecurity, ego. Silence denies them access. It doesn't escalate. It doesn't validate the attempt. It lets their energy hit a wall and fall back on itself. That's why silence feels uncomfortable at first. It removes the familiar script of reaction. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Reacting feels powerful in the moment, but it weakens you long-term. It trains your nervous system to believe that peace depends on external behavior. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Your peace depends on your judgment. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Provocation only works if you judge it as something that requires response. This doesn't mean you suppress emotion. It means you don't outsource your self-control. Silence is not avoidance. It is selection. You are choosing not to engage in an exchange that costs more than it gives. And that choice reshapes your identity. You stop being the person who is easily pulled into emotional games. You become the one who watches, assesses, and decides. There is something deeply unsettling about calm non-participation. They expect friction. They expect resistance. They expect you to mirror their intensity. When you don't, the imbalance becomes obvious. Their behavior stands alone, unsupported. That's where karma begins, not as punishment, but as exposure. Without your reaction to mask it, their intent becomes clear. Silence also protects your future self. Words spoken in emotional heat cannot be retrieved. The Stoics valued foresight because they understood regret. Seneca warned, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it." Every time you stay silent instead of reacting, you are sparing yourself the cost of cleanup, explaining, apologizing, repairing damage that never needed to happen. Here's a practical exercise. The next time you feel provoked, don't ask, "What should I say?" Ask, "What am I being invited to feel?" Anger, shame, the need to dominate. Numbing the emotion breaks its spell. Then pause for 10 slow breaths. This is not weakness. This is training. You are teaching your body that urgency is not authority. Another practice. Write down the last few times you reacted emotionally and ask yourself one question for each. Did this reaction improve my position, my peace, or my character? Stoicism is brutally honest. It doesn't care about justification. It cares about results. Silence, more often than not, produces better ones. When you stay silent during provocation, you reclaim time. Time to think, time to choose, time to respond later if responding still makes sense. Most provocations lose their power when delayed. They rely on immediacy. Remove that and they collapse. Advised, be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. You don't chase the waves, you outlast them. This kind of silence also builds reputation. Not a loud one, a quiet one. People begin to sense that you are not easily rattled, that emotional manipulation doesn't work on you, that your reactions are deliberate, not reflexive. This creates respect, even among those who don't like you, especially among them. But the real benefit is internal. Each time you remain silent in the face of provocation, you strengthen your self-trust. You prove to yourself that you are not governed by impulse, that you can feel emotion without becoming it, that you can stand in discomfort without escaping into reaction. That is freedom. Here's one more exercise. For the next week, commit to one rule: no emotional responses on the first impulse, not suppression. Delay. Write what you want to say privately if you must. Let the emotion pass through without expression. Then decide if a response is still necessary. Most of the time, you'll find it is. Stoicism never promised you fairness from others. It promised you command over yourself. Karma, in the Stoic sense, is not mystical. It is cause and effect. When you refuse to participate in provocation, you change the pattern. The instigator either escalates and exposes themselves or withdraws when the reward disappears. Either way, you remain intact. Silence is not passive. It is disciplined restraint. It is choosing dignity over drama, control over chaos, long-term clarity over short-term release. When someone tries to provoke you emotionally, staying silent is not letting them win. It's refusing to play a game you never agreed to. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Calm replaces urgency. Observation replaces reaction. Strength replaces noise. That is when karma truly speaks, not because you forced it to, but because you finally stopped interrupting it. Number 2, when false accusations are made and truth needs time. Few things test your inner strength like being falsely accused. The impulse to defend yourself immediately is almost irresistible. Your mind races. Your chest tightens. You want to correct the story, reclaim your image, and force the truth into the light right now. But Stoicism teaches you a harder, quieter discipline. Sometimes the most powerful response is restraint. Sometimes truth needs time, not noise. Reminded himself, be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. When false accusations arise, the waves are loud, emotional, and impatient. If you jump in too quickly, you often add turbulence rather than clarity. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is not weakness. It is composure under fire. False accusations thrive on reaction. They feed on urgency and emotional energy. The more frantic the defense, the more oxygen the accusation receives. Stoicism asks you to zoom out, to recognize what is within your control and what is not. You cannot control how quickly others understand the truth. You cannot force perception to shift on command, but you can control your conduct, your consistency, and your inner order. That is where your power lives. Epictetus was blunt about this. If someone speaks ill of you, do not defend yourself against the accusations, but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." This isn't sarcasm. It's psychological armor. When you refuse to be dragged into emotional wrestling, you deny the accusation its greatest weapon, your agitation. Silence is not passive. It is active restraint. It's the decision to let your character speak louder than your rebuttal. Truth, when grounded in consistency, has weight. Lies require constant maintenance. They need reinforcement, repetition, and escalation. Truth only needs time and steadiness. When you keep showing up the same way, calm, disciplined, grounded, contradictions begin to reveal themselves without your intervention. The mistake most people make is confusing silence with surrender. They believe that if they don't immediately respond, they lose. Stoicism flips that belief. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." When you stay silent, you are not conceding guilt. You are refusing to become reactive, petty, or desperate. You are choosing dignity over drama. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you don't speak from panic. Truth delivered too early when emotions are high is often distorted or ignored. Silence creates space. Space allows narratives to cool, and in that cooling, inconsistencies surface. People begin to notice patterns. They observe who remains stable and who keeps shifting their story. There is also a deeper Stoic reason for silence here: attachment. False accusations hurt most when you are attached to how others see you. Stoicism trains you to loosen that attachment, not because reputation is meaningless, but because your worth cannot depend on fluctuating opinions. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Freedom here means freedom from the need to correct every misunderstanding immediately. Here's a practical exercise. When you feel falsely accused, pause and write down 2 columns. In the first, list what you can control right now: your behavior, your tone, your consistency, your integrity. In the second, list what you cannot control: opinions, gossip, timelines, reactions. Read that list slowly. Then commit to acting only on the first column for the next 24 hours. This trains your nervous system to choose reason over impulse. Another practice: delay your response, not indefinitely but intentionally. Give yourself space to calm your body before deciding whether words are even necessary. Often, after the emotional charge fades, you realize that silence was already doing the work for you. Stoicism values timing as much as truth. Saying the right thing at the wrong moment is still a mistake. Staying silent also forces you to confront your own conscience. If the accusation is truly false, silence feels uncomfortable but clean. If it contains a fragment of truth, silence gives you space to reflect without defensiveness. Either way, you grow. Epictetus emphasized self-examination above self-defense. If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Letting others misunderstand you temporarily can be the price of long-term clarity. Karma in the Stoic sense is not mystical punishment. It is consequence. It is cause and effect unfolding over time. False narratives collapse under their own weight because they lack alignment with reality. But this only happens when you don't interfere by reacting emotionally. Your silence allows natural consequences to surface. Your composure becomes evidence. This is especially powerful because silence shifts the burden. When you stop defending yourself, observers stop focusing on your reactions and start watching behavior. Patterns emerge. Credibility reveals itself. You don't need to argue. You need to remain consistent. That consistency is exhausting for falsehoods to compete with. Try this mental reframe. Instead of asking, "How do I clear my name right now?" ask, "How do I live in a way that makes the truth unavoidable over time?" This moves you from urgency to strategy, from anxiety to authorship. Another exercise: daily self-command. Each morning, remind yourself of words. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Repeat it when your mind starts rehearsing arguments. Each time you choose calm over reaction, you strengthen the muscle that false accusations cannot touch. Silence also protects your energy. Defending yourself constantly is draining. It pulls you into battles you didn't choose and conversations that don't deserve you. Stoicism teaches conservation of energy for what truly matters: your growth, your purpose, your virtue. When you stay silent, you redirect that energy inward where it compounds. There will be moments when speaking becomes necessary. Stoicism is not muteness, it is measured speech. When you do speak, let it be brief, factual, and calm. No emotional pleading. Let your words be an extension of your composure, not a reaction against fear. Until then, let time work. Let behavior accumulate. Let karma, cause and effect, do what it always does when met with steadiness. You don't need to rush truth. Truth is patient. Staying silent when falsely accused is not about pride. It's about trust. Trust in reality. Trust in consistency. Trust in your own character. When you choose silence wisely, you step out of the emotional storm and onto solid ground. And from there, you don't need to shout. The truth arrives on its own terms. Number 3, when people gossip and expect your reaction. There is a particular kind of noise that doesn't come from chaos but from curiosity disguised as concern. Gossip. It rarely arrives openly, it circles, it hints, it waits for you to react, and when it does, it feeds. This is one of those moments where silence is not weakness, it is precision. When people gossip and expect your reaction, what they are really testing is your self-command. They want movement, emotion, validation, something they can pass along. And the most powerful response you can give them is nothing at all. The Stoics understood this dynamic deeply, reminded himself, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. Gossip only gains power when you participate emotionally. The words themselves are light. What gives them weight is your reaction. When you stay silent, you deny gossip its oxygen. You refuse to let your inner state be shaped by outer noise. Gossip is never really about truth. It's about energy transfer. Someone speaks, hoping you'll carry the message forward, amplify it, defend yourself against it, or react in a way that confirms their narrative. Silence breaks that circuit. It introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty makes gossip collapse in on itself. Without your response, there's nothing to build on. You don't need to correct every false impression. You don't need to explain yourself to every curious ear. Epictetus said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" There's humor in that, but more importantly, there's detachment. The Stoic doesn't rush to manage reputation moment by moment. He focuses on conduct. Reputation follows behavior over time, not rebuttals in the moment. When people gossip and look at you expectantly, silence unsettles them. They're waiting for a spark. When none comes, they're forced to sit with their own intention. That's where karma begins to work, not as mysticism, but as consequence. Words spoken without reaction lose momentum. Motives without validation lose direction. People reveal themselves when you don't interrupt the process. This kind of silence requires discipline. The urge to defend yourself can feel overwhelming. Your mind wants resolution. It wants to clean the air immediately. But Stoicism teaches patience with discomfort. Seneca wrote, "A person who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Reacting to gossip is suffering early. Silence delays nothing important. It simply allows reality to surface on its own timeline. Here's the deeper reason silence works. Gossip is rooted in insecurity. It seeks alignment. It wants you to join, to agree, to oppose, or to perform outrage. When you stay calm and quiet, you refuse all 4 roles. You become uninteresting to the drama. And drama, deprived of attention, dissolves. This doesn't mean you suppress emotion. It means you choose where emotion belongs. Not every feeling deserves an audience. Not every thought deserves a voice. Stoicism is not about repression. It's about placement. You process privately so you can act clearly. You don't outsource your emotional regulation to people who thrive on reaction. Here's a practical exercise. The next time gossip reaches your ears and pauses, waiting for you, focus on your breath. Slow it. Feel your body settle. Then ask yourself one question internally. Will my reaction improve my character or just satisfy my impulse? If it's the second, remain silent. This pause alone rewires your response over time. Another exercise. At the end of the day, reflect briefly. Where were you tempted to speak unnecessarily? Where did silence feel uncomfortable but right? Use nightly reflection not to criticize himself, but to train awareness. This habit builds restraint without bitterness. Silence also protects your future self. Words spoken in reaction often outlive the moment that triggered them. Gossip spreads sideways. Silence moves forward. When you don't respond, you keep your dignity intact and your options open. You're not locked into a version of yourself shaped by a fleeting emotional spike. There's a quiet authority in refusing to perform. People notice it, even if they don't admit it. Silence communicates boundaries without confrontation. It says, "I don't need to engage with this to remain whole." That's powerful, and power doesn't announce itself. You might worry that silence looks like agreement. It doesn't. It looks like self-possession. Those who matter will eventually see consistency in your actions. Those who rely on gossip will move on when there's nothing to extract from you. Karma doesn't rush. It observes. It balances slowly but thoroughly. Here's another habit to adopt. Separate what is said from who you are. Gossip attacks an image, not your essence. When you remember this, words lose their sting. Epictetus taught that external things, opinions included, are not under your control and therefore not your concern. Your concern is how you respond. That's where your freedom lives. Silence is also an act of trust. Trust that truth doesn't need constant defense. Trust that time reveals patterns better than arguments. Trust that your character is louder than rumors. This kind of trust calms the nervous system. It frees mental space, and people are drawn to those who move through noise without being dragged by it. You don't stay silent to appear superior. You stay silent to remain centered. There's a difference. Stoic silence is not passive. It's active restraint. It's aware. It's chosen. And when chosen consistently, it reshapes how others treat you. They learn quickly that you are not a mirror for their projections. If you want to strengthen this skill, practice voluntary silence in low-stakes moments. Don't comment immediately. Don't fill pauses. Let conversations breathe. This trains your nervous system to tolerate stillness. And once you're comfortable with stillness, gossip loses its leverage. When people gossip and expect your reaction, silence allows karma to speak, not through punishment but through exposure. Motives surface. Patterns repeat. Truth settles. You remain untouched because you never stepped into the mud. This is not about winning social exchanges. It's about protecting your inner state, said, the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do. That tranquility is not indifference, it's clarity. Choose silence when noise is bait. Choose composure when reaction is expected. Let others talk themselves into clarity while you remain grounded. Over time, this habit becomes part of your presence. Calm, unavailable to drama, steady. That's when karma doesn't need your help. It speaks clearly on its own. Number 4. When you're tempted to explain yourself to those who won't listen. There's a particular kind of temptation that feels almost irresistible, the urge to explain yourself to someone who has already decided not to understand you. Your mind starts racing. You rehearse arguments. You imagine how, if you could just say it the right way, clarity would finally land. But deep down, something in you already knows the truth. This isn't about being heard. It's about wanting relief. And Stoicism teaches you that relief gained by self-betrayal is never relief at all. Warned himself of this exact trap when he wrote, "Never value the approval of someone who doesn't approve of himself." When someone isn't listening, it's rarely because your explanation lacks quality. It's because their position is already fixed. Explaining yourself in that moment doesn't create understanding. It drains your dignity. Silence, on the other hand, preserves your center. You have to understand this clearly. Not every misunderstanding deserves clarification. Some deserve distance. When you explain yourself to closed ears, you are negotiating with someone else's unwillingness. And that negotiation always costs you something. Your energy, your calm, your authority. Stoicism is not about winning arguments, it's about governing yourself. Epictetus put it simply, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That includes being misunderstood by people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Silence in these moments is not weakness, it's restraint. It's choosing self-respect over short-term emotional discharge. When you speak to someone who won't listen, you're not communicating, you're performing. You're trying to rescue your image, justify your intentions, or soften their judgment. And the Stoics would ask you a hard question here. Why are you giving someone that much power over your inner state? The need to explain yourself often comes from a subtle fear that if you don't speak, the narrative will go against you. But Stoicism teaches you that you do not control narratives, you control actions. Seneca wrote, "A good character is the best tombstone." In other words, let your consistency speak. Let time do the explaining you are tempted to do prematurely. Karma, as people like to call it, isn't mystical. It's cumulative. Truth has a way of surfacing when you stop interfering with it. There is also something deeply stabilizing that happens when you choose silence here. You interrupt the cycle. Instead of reacting, you respond by not responding. Instead of defending, you observe. And observation brings clarity. You begin to see that some people are not looking for truth, they are looking for confirmation. Explaining yourself to them is like pouring water into a sealed container. Nothing enters, everything spills. Here's a practice you can adopt immediately. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause and ask one question. Is this person curious or committed? Curious people ask questions. Committed people make statements. If curiosity is absent, silence is your answer. This isn't coldness, it's wisdom. Reminded himself, you always own the option of having no opinion. And with no opinion comes peace. Silence also trains your emotional discipline. Every time you resist the urge to justify yourself, you strengthen your ability to sit with discomfort without being controlled by it. That's Stoic resilience in action. You learn that you don't need immediate validation to remain whole. You don't need to be understood by everyone to stay grounded. This self-sufficiency changes how you move through the world. Another exercise. For 1 week, make a rule for yourself. No explanations unless they are genuinely requested, not demanded, requested. Notice how often you were about to speak out of habit rather than necessity. Notice how much calmer your inner world becomes when you stop volunteering defenses. This is not about shutting down, it's about speaking with intention. There's a deeper layer here that most people miss. When you over-explain yourself, you unintentionally communicate doubt in your own position. Silence, when chosen consciously, communicates certainty, not arrogance, certainty. Epictetus taught that freedom comes from wanting nothing that depends on others. Approval depends on others. Understanding depends on others. Self-respect does not. You also need to trust time more. Time is a brutal but fair witness. When you stop arguing and start living consistently, contradictions expose themselves. Motives become clear. Truth doesn't need a spokesperson, it needs patience. When you step back, you allow reality to do the work your mouth cannot. Try this reflection exercise. At the end of each day, write down one moment where you stayed silent instead of explaining yourself. Then write how it felt initially and how it felt later. You'll begin to see a pattern. Initial discomfort followed by long-term calm. That's the Stoic trade-off. Short-term unease for lasting stability. Staying silent doesn't mean you never speak. It means you speak when words can actually land. Stoicism is not passivity. It's precision. You conserve your voice for places where it matters. And when you do speak, your words carry weight because they are rare, measured, and grounded. Remember what Seneca said. He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary. Explaining yourself to someone who won't listen is suffering in advance. Silence spares you that. It keeps you aligned. It keeps you whole. So the next time your chest tightens and your mind starts drafting explanations for someone who has already closed their ears, stop, breathe, choose restraint. Let your actions speak. Let time clarify. Let karma, cause and effect, do what it always does when you stop interfering. Silence in these moments is not avoidance, it is mastery. Number 5. When disrespect is used to bait you into conflict. There are moments when disrespect isn't accidental, it's deliberate, calculated, thrown in your direction not to express truth but to pull you off your center, to provoke a reaction, to drag you into noise where clarity dies. This is the kind of disrespect that doesn't want resolution, it wants control. And the most powerful move you can make in those moments is not a clever reply, not a sharp comeback, but silence. Calm, grounded, intentional silence. The Stoics understood this deeply, reminded himself, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. Disrespect only becomes real when you accept the invitation. When you react emotionally, you confirm that the bait worked. Silence, on the other hand, denies the aggressor what they are truly after, access to your emotional energy. When someone uses disrespect to bait you into conflict, they are trying to flip the roles. They want you reactive so they can feel dominant. They want you loud so they can feel justified. They want chaos because chaos gives them leverage. Silence removes that leverage instantly. It doesn't escalate. It doesn't explain. It doesn't perform. It simply refuses to participate. This is not weakness. It's discipline. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Silence often looks like weakness to those who mistake volume for strength, but internally it requires restraint, self-command, and clarity. You are choosing long-term power over short-term relief. Most people react because they want to restore their sense of dignity immediately. But dignity is not restored through reaction. It's preserved through self-respect. When you stay silent, you send a message without words. I am not ruled by your behavior. That message lands far deeper than any insult ever could. There is also a deeper dynamic at play. Disrespect used as bait is often designed to make you look bad, to provoke you into saying something that can later be used against you. Silence protects your position. It leaves no evidence, no missteps, no emotional fingerprints. Seneca warned, anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. Silence is restraint in its form. You don't stay silent because you are afraid. You stay silent because you are strategic, because you understand that not every battle deserves your presence. Some conflicts collapse on their own when deprived of attention. Karma doesn't need your help when someone reveals their character through disrespect. Your job is simply not to interfere. This is where most people struggle. Silence feels uncomfortable. It feels unresolved. It feels like letting something slide. But Stoicism teaches you to distinguish between ego discomfort and actual harm. Not every slight is a threat. Not every insult is an emergency. When you respond emotionally, you often validate something that didn't deserve validation in the first place. Here's a practical exercise. The next time you feel disrespected, pause and do nothing for 10 seconds. Not mentally rehearsing a response, just breathing. Let the initial surge pass. Ask yourself one question: will responding here increase my power or reduce it? If the answer isn't clearly increase, silence is the wiser move. Another exercise. At the end of each day, reflect briefly. Where were you tempted to react? Where did you hold back? Don't judge yourself. Observe. Treated reflection as training, not self-criticism. Over time, you'll notice that the urge to react loses its grip. You become harder to provoke, and that alone changes how people treat you. Silence also forces accountability onto the other person. When you don't engage, they are left alone with their behavior. No distraction, no sparring partner, just their own actions echoing back at them. This is where karma operates most effectively, not dramatically, quietly, naturally. You must understand this clearly. Silence is not passivity, it's a choice, a refusal to descend, a declaration that your inner state matters more than winning a moment. Epictetus said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Silence is a reaction, just not the one most people expect. There will be times when speaking up is necessary. Stoicism is not about avoidance, it's about timing. When disrespect is meant to bait you into emotional conflict, speaking usually serves the other person's agenda, not yours. Silence preserves your clarity until action, not reaction, is required. Here's another habit to adopt. Practice intentional quiet in low-stakes situations. Don't rush to fill silence. Don't explain yourself unnecessarily. This trains your nervous system to stay calm without external validation. The more comfortable you become with silence, the less power provocation has over you. People who cannot control you often try to provoke you. When that fails, they escalate. When that fails, they expose themselves. And through all of it, your silence becomes a mirror, not reflecting their words, but their intentions. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Silence is delay made visible. It buys you space. It keeps your reputation intact. It keeps your conscience clear. And it allows karma to operate without interference. Staying silent does not mean you accept disrespect. It means you don't dignify it with a reaction. There is a difference. You can set boundaries later calmly, firmly, without emotion. But in the moment of bait, silence is often the most self-respecting response available. When you master this, something shifts. You stop feeling the need to defend your worth. You realize your worth doesn't require defense, and that realization is freeing. You become harder to manipulate, harder to destabilize, harder to pull into unnecessary conflict. So the next time disrespect comes disguised as an invitation to argue, remember this. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Let silence do the talking. Let karma handle the rest. And keep your energy where it belongs, within your control. Number 6, when success makes others uncomfortable. There comes a point where your progress begins to speak louder than anything you could ever say. And strangely, that's when tension appears. Not because you've done something wrong, but because your forward motion unsettles people who are standing still. This is one of those moments where silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. When your success makes others uncomfortable, the Stoic response is restraint, not explanation. Reminded himself, be content to seem what you really are. That line is heavier than it sounds. It means you don't owe anyone a justification for your growth. You don't need to narrate your journey, defend your momentum, or soften your edge to make others feel safe. Your discipline is not an attack. Your progress is not an insult. But insecurity interprets it that way anyway. And that's precisely why silence is power here. When others feel unsettled by your success, they often look for reassurance, comparison, or reaction. Words become fuel, explanations become invitations, defensiveness becomes permission. Silence, on the other hand, denies them leverage. It communicates something far stronger than argument ever could: inner stability. You are not here to compete emotionally. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. You are here to walk your path cleanly. Stoicism teaches you that not every provocation deserves a response. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." When success draws discomfort from others, responding emotionally pulls you down into their frame. Silence keeps you sovereign. It keeps your nervous system calm and your direction intact. This kind of silence isn't passive, it's disciplined. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your life is moving forward whether or not others approve. You don't shrink to be liked. You don't explain to be understood. You don't dim your light to preserve fragile egos. You simply continue. And continuation is the loudest message of all. People often mistake silence for avoidance. It's not, it's selection. You're choosing not to waste energy on dynamics that don't build your character. Success already demands focus, sacrifice, and consistency. Adding emotional labor on top of that, especially for those uncomfortable with your growth, is unnecessary friction. The Stoics would call that a misuse of attention. Here's the deeper truth most people miss. Discomfort around your success is rarely about you. It's about contrast. Your discipline highlights their indecision. Your momentum exposes their stagnation. Your consistency mirrors their inconsistency. And rather than confront that internally, many project it outward. Silence refuses to participate in that projection. Seneca wrote, "It is better to conquer our grief than to deceive it." When others react negatively to your success, their discomfort is theirs to process, not yours to soothe. Speaking too much often becomes a form of emotional caretaking. Silence allows karma, cause and effect, to do its work naturally. You keep growing. They confront themselves or they don't. Either way, you stay aligned. There's also something profoundly attractive about someone who doesn't explain their elevation. Not arrogance, not dismissal, just calm forward motion. When you do narrate your progress, people fill in the blanks. And most of the time, those blanks command more respect than words ever could. Here's a practical exercise. For the next week, notice when you feel the urge to justify your success. Not out loud, internally. Notice the impulse to soften, to downplay, to explain, to reassure. Pause, breathe, say nothing. Let the moment pass. This trains emotional restraint. And emotional restraint is a form of dominance over the self. Another practice. Each morning, remind yourself of this Stoic principle. I am responsible for my actions, not for others' reactions. Write it down. Read it slowly. When discomfort surfaces around your growth, return to that line. It recenters you immediately. Silence also protects you from corruption. When success becomes something you constantly explain, you start modifying it to be more palatable. You dilute your standards. You slow your pace. You trade excellence for acceptance. The Stoics warned against this trap relentlessly. Wrote, "Never value anything as profitable to you which shall compel you to break your word or lose your self-respect." Self-respect erodes quietly when you prioritize emotional comfort over integrity. Staying silent doesn't mean being cold. It means being clean. Clean in intention, clean in action, clean in direction. You are not punishing anyone with your quiet. You are preserving your momentum. You are letting results speak in the only language that cannot be argued with. There's also a spiritual dimension here, even if you don't frame it that way. Karma is not revenge, it's alignment. When you stay focused, disciplined, and unreactive, life has a way of sorting things out without your interference. The Stoics trusted this deeply, not as mysticism, but as natural order. Actions produce outcomes. Character shapes destiny. Noise is optional. Here's another exercise. At the end of each day, ask yourself one question. Where did I speak when silence would have been stronger? Don't shame yourself. Just observe. Then ask, where did I remain composed today? Reinforce that behavior. Stoicism is built through reflection, not self-criticism. When success makes others uncomfortable, silence becomes a mirror. It reflects confidence without confrontation. It shows boundaries without hostility. It communicates, I am not here to manage your emotions. That message, unspoken, is felt clearly. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to correct narratives. You don't need to win social battles. Your life is the argument. Your consistency is the evidence. Your calm is the verdict. So let your success breathe. Let your actions accumulate quietly. Let karma do what it has always done, reward discipline, expose insecurity, and reveal truth over time. Stay silent, stay focused, stay aligned. That's not avoidance, that's mastery. Number 7. When silence protects your dignity more than words. There are moments when speaking feels urgent, almost necessary, like silence would mean weakness or surrender. Your mind races to defend, to clarify, to correct. But dignity doesn't live in that rush. Dignity lives in restraint. And there are times when silence protects what words would only cheapen. Not because you're afraid, not because you lack an answer, but because you respect yourself enough not to explain your worth to noise. The Stoics understood this deeply, reminded himself, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Silence in those moments is not passivity, it is separation. It is the decision to step out of chaos rather than wrestle with it. When you respond to every provocation, you give away your center. When you stay silent with intention, you keep it. Words are powerful, but they are also revealing. Every unnecessary explanation exposes need. Every reactive defense signals insecurity. Silence, on the other hand, communicates self-command. It says, without saying anything, I am not shaken. That is dignity, not loud pride, quiet self-respect. You don't owe your voice to every situation. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't have to prove your innocence to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Epictetus warned, if someone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone. That is not sarcasm. That is freedom. Silence protects your dignity when words would drag you into a frame you didn't choose. When you explain yourself to someone who isn't listening, you step into their courtroom. You become the accused. Silence refuses that role. It keeps you standing upright while others circle in noise. There is also something else happening beneath the surface. Silence allows consequences to unfold naturally. Karma, if you want to call it that, operates best without interference. When you react emotionally, you interrupt the process. You muddy the waters. When you step back, reality speaks clearly. Truth doesn't need your voice to survive. It only needs time. This is difficult because your ego wants resolution now. It wants validation. It wants to be seen as right. Stoicism teaches you to question that impulse. Seneca wrote, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Many arguments are suffered only because you insist on engaging. Silence removes unnecessary suffering. It lets the moment pass without carving itself into you. Staying silent doesn't mean you are weak. It means you are selective. You understand that your energy is finite, that not every battle deserves your presence, that dignity is preserved by choosing when not to speak just as much as by knowing when to speak. Here's a practice. The next time you feel the urge to defend yourself, pause, not forever, just pause. Take one breath and ask yourself, will my words elevate me or will they entangle me? If they entangle, choose silence. That pause is where self-mastery lives. Silence also protects your dignity because it keeps you aligned with your values rather than your emotions. Emotions rise fast, values endure. When you speak from emotion, you often betray your standards. When you wait, clarity returns. Said, you can leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That perspective shrinks petty exchanges into irrelevance. Another reason silence is powerful is that it denies others the reaction they seek. Many provocations are not about truth, they are about control. When you don't react, the power dynamic collapses. You reclaim authorship over yourself. That calm refusal unsettles more than any clever reply ever could. This doesn't mean you suppress your thoughts. It means you process them privately, not publicly. Write them down, walk them out, sit with them. Stoicism never asked you to deny emotion, only to govern it. Silence is governance in action. Try this exercise. For 1 week, treat silence as a deliberate practice, not avoidance, precision. Speak when your words add clarity, restraint, or value. Withhold speech when it would only serve ego, impulse, or the need to win. At the end of the week, notice how much lighter your mind feels, how fewer regrets linger, how your presence feels steadier. Silence also sharpens your awareness. When you stop filling space with words, you start noticing patterns. You see who thrives on reaction. You see who respects boundaries. You see how often noise disguises insecurity. This awareness makes you calmer, more strategic, more grounded. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Listening is not submission. It is observation, and observation gives you leverage. When you understand without reacting, you gain control over yourself, and that is the only control Stoicism ever promised. There will be moments when silence feels uncomfortable. Let it. Discomfort is not danger, it is training. Each time you choose silence over a reactive explanation, you strengthen your dignity muscle. You teach yourself that you are not dependent on immediate validation, that your worth is not up for debate. Silence protects your dignity because it keeps your character intact. Words spoken in haste often need to be repaired. Silence rarely does. And when the dust settles, when emotions fade, when truth rises on its own, you remain clean, unentangled, whole. This is where karma speaks, not as punishment or reward, but as consequence. You let actions echo. You let reality unfold. You let people reveal themselves without interruption, and you remain steady while they exhaust themselves. The goal is not to be silent always. The goal is to be silent wisely, to know that dignity is not loud. It does not argue, it stands, calm, rooted, unmoved. Start today, not by forcing silence, but by respecting it. Let it protect you. Let it sharpen you. Let it remind you that you don't need to say everything you think to be powerful. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is say nothing and walk away with your self-respect untouched. Number 8, when arguing would only inflate someone's ego. There are moments when speaking feels justified, even necessary. Your mind lines up the arguments. Your chest tightens. You feel the urge to correct, to defend, to win. But Stoicism asks you to pause right there, because not every silence is weakness, and not every argument is strength. Sometimes, the most disciplined move you can make is to say nothing at all, especially when speaking would only feed someone else's ego. The Stoics understood something most people miss. Ego thrives on resistance. It feeds on attention, opposition, and emotional engagement. When you argue with someone who is not seeking truth but dominance, you don't diminish them, you energize them. You give them exactly what they want. Epictetus warned, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Silence in these moments is not retreat, it is refusal. You don't stay silent because you have nothing to say. You stay silent because you see the exchange for what it is, a performance, a contest of identity, not a pursuit of understanding. When someone's ego is on display, arguing only turns you into a prop in their story. Your words become fuel. Your emotions become validation. Silence cuts off the supply. This is where inner strength is tested. Your pride wants to respond. Your intellect wants to prove. Your emotions want release. But Stoicism trains you to ask a different question. What outcome does this produce? If the answer is more noise, more tension, more self-importance on the other side, then speaking is not courage. It's indulgence. Reminded himself, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. When you argue with someone driven by ego, you adopt their frame. You step into their arena. Silence keeps you sovereign. It keeps you out of unnecessary battles and preserves your energy for what actually matters. You are not here to win every exchange. You are here to govern yourself. And self-governance sometimes looks like restraint. It looks like letting someone exhaust themselves while you remain unmoved. That calm unnerves ego far more than confrontation ever could. Ego wants reaction. Silence denies it drama. There is also a deeper layer to this. When you argue with ego, you often betray your own peace. Your heart rate rises. Your thoughts scatter. Long after the conversation ends, your mind keeps replaying it. Stoicism teaches you to protect your inner state as your most valuable possession. Seneca wrote, "No man is hurt but by himself." Arguing with ego hurts you more than it ever corrects them. Silence, when chosen consciously, is an act of discipline. It says, "I don't need to prove myself here." It says, "My worth is not negotiated through debate." That posture radiates composure. People feel it. Even those who don't understand it sense that something is different about you. You are not easily pulled into chaos. Here, where karma enters not as superstition but as consequence. Ego collapses under its own weight. It overreaches. It exposes itself. It creates patterns others notice. When you step back, you allow those patterns to unfold naturally. You don't interfere. You don't interrupt. You let cause and effect do their work. Silence gives space for truth to surface on its own. Try this practice. The next time you feel the urge to argue, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. Is this person open to understanding? Is my goal clarity or control? Will speaking improve my inner state or disturb it? If the answer doesn't align with peace and principle, choose silence. Not with bitterness, with calm. Another exercise. For 1 week, deliberately avoid defending yourself unnecessarily. Notice how often your impulse to speak is tied to ego rather than purpose. Observe without judgment. This awareness alone begins to dissolve the habit. Stoicism is not about suppression. It's about discernment. Silence also communicates boundaries. It tells the other person without explanation that you won't engage on those terms, that you don't participate in emotional theater. This is not passive, it's selective. You choose where your voice matters. You choose where your energy goes. Epictetus advised, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Listening, or choosing not to respond, gives you leverage. You see more. You understand the dynamics at play. And from that clarity, you act more effectively later, if action is even needed. Most arguments fueled by ego resolve nothing. They end with hardened positions and wounded pride. Silence avoids that trap. It keeps you fluid. It keeps your dignity intact. And often, it leaves the other person confronting the echo of their own words. That discomfort is far more instructive than any rebuttal you could deliver. This does not mean you never speak up. Stoicism is not cowardice. It is timing. When truth has a chance to land, speak it clearly. When it will only be used as a mirror for someone's self-importance, withhold it. Said, you always own the option of having no opinion. That option is power. There is peace in knowing you don't have to correct everything, that you don't have to engage every challenge, that your silence can be intentional, not reactive. Over time, this habit reshapes your presence. You become less predictable, less manipulable, more grounded. Let karma speak because karma is patient. It doesn't argue, it reveals. And when you trust that process, you free yourself from exhausting cycles of justification. You conserve your energy. You strengthen your mind. You move through life with a quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself. Start today. Choose one moment of silence where you would normally argue. Feel the discomfort. Breathe through it. Notice how quickly it passes. What remains is clarity, and that clarity is worth far more than winning any argument ever could be. Number 9. When your actions can speak louder than any defense. There are moments when silence is not weakness, not avoidance, not surrender, but power. You feel the urge to explain yourself, to correct the record, to defend your name. Your mind races with arguments that could set things straight. And yet, the Stoics would tell you to pause, because not every accusation deserves a response, and not every misunderstanding needs your voice. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is to let your actions do the talking, and let time, what people often call karma, handle the rest. Reminded himself, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That single line captures the essence of this principle. When your conduct is consistent, when your character is visible over time, words become redundant. Defense is usually a reaction. Action is a position, and people can sense the difference. When you rush to explain yourself, you subtly communicate insecurity. When you stay silent and continue living with discipline, clarity, and purpose, you communicate certainty. Silence becomes powerful when you realize that explanations are often given to soothe your own discomfort, not to reveal truth. You want to be understood immediately. You want relief now. But truth doesn't operate on urgency. It unfolds. Stoicism trains you to tolerate that delay without losing composure. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That is not an insult. It is a challenge. Can you endure being misunderstood without betraying your principles? Can you resist the itch to prove yourself and instead let your life demonstrate who you are? When your actions can speak louder than any defense, silence becomes a filter. It separates those who are genuinely observant from those who only react to noise. Words can be twisted, intentions can be misread, but consistent behavior is difficult to argue with. It has weight. It has memory. Over time, it tells a story far more convincing than any explanation you could give in the heat of emotion. You don't stay silent because you are afraid. You stay silent because you are grounded, because you understand that reacting emotionally gives control away. Seneca warned, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Silence creates that delay. It allows reason to remain in the driver's seat, and reason in Stoicism is everything. When you choose action over argument, you are choosing long-term credibility over short-term relief. This doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent. It means you become deliberate. You redirect the energy you would have spent defending yourself into refining your conduct. You tighten your discipline. You sharpen your habits. You make your values visible through consistency. That is how karma is set in motion, not through revenge, but through alignment. When you live rightly, consequences arrange themselves without your interference. Here's a practical shift you can make. The next time you feel compelled to justify yourself, pause and ask, will this explanation change reality or just my emotional state? If it only serves to calm your irritation, let it go. Instead, choose one action that reinforces who you are. One act of discipline. One act of integrity. One act of restraint. This is Stoic silence in motion. Another exercise, write down the situations where you feel most tempted to defend yourself. Look for patterns. Is it when your intentions are questioned? When your effort goes unnoticed? When your boundaries upset others? Awareness matters. Once you see the pattern, you can prepare. Use this method constantly, anticipating challenges so they wouldn't catch him emotionally off guard. Silence also protects your dignity. When you argue with people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you lower yourself into their frame. You accept their premise. Stoicism teaches you to choose your battles carefully, and often the highest ground is not speaking at all. Epictetus said, It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Some people are not seeking truth. They are seeking reaction. Silence starves that desire. Letting actions speak requires patience. It demands trust in time, in cause and effect, in the quiet mathematics of behavior. This is where many people fail. They want immediate vindication, but the Stoic path is not built for impatience. It is built for endurance. You keep showing up the same way, calm, principled, unmoved. Eventually, reality does the explaining for you. There is also a deeper freedom in this approach. When you stop defending yourself verbally, you detach from the need for constant validation. You stop living on trial. Your sense of self becomes internal rather than negotiated. That inner independence is unmistakable. People feel it. They may not always understand it, but they respect it. Try this practice for a week. Commit to one rule: no unnecessary explanations. Not silence out of spite, but silence out of self-respect. Speak when clarity is required, not when ego is bruised. Observe how much energy you reclaim. Notice how often situations resolve themselves without your intervention. This is not withdrawal from life. It is mastery of response. Stoicism does not promise that silence will always be rewarded immediately, but it teaches that virtue is never wasted. Seneca wrote, "A good character is the only guarantee of everlasting, carefree happiness." When your actions are aligned with your values, you no longer need to chase justice. You live it, and over time, others see it, sometimes too late, but always clearly. Staying silent when your actions can speak louder is not about letting people walk over you. It is about refusing to wrestle in the mud. You don't need to announce your strength. You demonstrate it through restraint, through consistency, through a life that does not contradict itself. Karma in the Stoic sense is not mystical. It is practical. It is the accumulation of choices. When you choose discipline over defense, integrity over impulse, silence over spectacle, you set forces in motion that require no commentary. Your life becomes your statement. So the next time you feel misunderstood, pause, breathe, return to your principles, act in accordance with them, and let that be enough. Because when your actions are aligned, silence is not empty, it is full of authority. Number 10. When patience allows karma to reveal the truth. There are moments when silence feels unbearable. When you want to correct the record, defend your name, explain yourself, or expose what you know. Everything in you wants to speak, to push back, to force clarity right now. But this is precisely the moment where patience becomes power. Not passive patience, not fear-based silence, but disciplined restraint. The kind the Stoics understood deeply. The kind that allows truth to surface without you contaminating it with emotion. Reminded himself, be calm. Nothing can happen to you that is not natural. When you rush to speak, it's often because you're trying to control how reality unfolds. Silence, on the other hand, is an act of trust. Trust that reality doesn't need your panic to reveal itself. Trust that time has a way of stripping masks away. Trust that truth, when left undisturbed, is self-exposing. Karma in the Stoic sense isn't mystical, it's mechanical, cause and effect, character revealing itself over time. When someone acts out of insecurity, deception, or ego, they eventually contradict themselves. Their behavior leaks. Their words unravel. But when you interfere too early, when you rush to expose, accuse, or defend, you interrupt the process. You shift attention away from their actions and onto your reaction. And suddenly, the spotlight moves off the truth. Silence protects you from that mistake. It keeps you clean. It keeps your dignity intact. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That includes being misunderstood temporarily. That includes letting others believe what they will for now. Silence is not weakness when it's chosen deliberately. It's strength under control. When patience allows karma to reveal the truth, You stop fighting battles that don't require your energy. You realize that not every accusation deserves a response. Not every lie needs correction. Not every misunderstanding is yours to fix. Some things collapse under their own weight if you simply don't prop them up with your emotional labor. This is difficult because the ego hates uncertainty. It wants resolution. It wants validation. It wants to be seen as right. But Stoicism teaches you that peace comes from alignment, not approval. Seneca wrote, "A man is as unhappy as he has convinced himself he is." When you stay silent, you refuse to let your emotional state be dictated by external noise. You choose inner order over outward victory. There's also a deeper layer here. Silence gives you leverage, not manipulative leverage, but moral leverage. When you don't rush to defend yourself, you communicate with confidence. You signal that you don't need to scramble for control. People sense that. They watch more closely. And in that stillness, inconsistencies become visible. Patterns emerge. Truth rises without being pushed. This doesn't mean you never speak. Stoicism is not about muteness. It's about timing, about proportion, about knowing when words will clarify and when they will only escalate. Wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." When you react impulsively, you mirror chaos. When you remain composed, you let contrast do the work for you. Here's a practical exercise. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause for 1 full minute. No phone, no rehearsing arguments in your head, just breathing. Ask yourself one question: will speaking now reveal the truth or just relieve my discomfort? If it's the second, stay silent. This single habit will change your emotional discipline more than any clever response ever could. Another practice. For 1 week, stop correcting perceptions that don't directly affect your values or safety. Let people think what they think. Watch what happens. Notice how often situations resolve themselves without your intervention. Notice how often your silence forces others to reveal more than you ever could with words. This is patience in action. Silence also sharpens your discernment. When you're not busy reacting, you start observing. Tone, timing, patterns. Stoicism values perception over impulse. Epictetus taught that events themselves are neutral. It's our judgments that disturb us. When you stay quiet, you give yourself space to see clearly instead of emotionally. Karma works fastest when you stop interfering. Lies require maintenance. Truth does not. False narratives need constant reinforcement. Authenticity stands on its own. When you withdraw your energy, falsehood weakens. It has nothing to feed on. This is not revenge. This is physics. There will be moments when silence feels like loss, when it feels like you're letting something slide. But in reality, you're choosing long-term authority over short-term relief. You're choosing to be grounded rather than reactive. Seneca warned, anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. Silence restrains anger without suppressing strength. Here's another exercise. Write down the situations where silence protected you, not outwardly but internally. Staying quiet preserves your self-respect, where patience prevented regret. Return to this list when you feel tempted to speak too soon. Let evidence guide you, not emotion. The truth does not need your anxiety to survive. It needs time, and time is ruthless with deception. When you stay silent, you align yourself with that process. You become untouchable, not because nothing happens, but because nothing destabilizes you. Staying silent when patience allows karma to reveal the truth is an act of maturity. It says, "I trust reality more than I trust my impulses." It says, "I don't need to force outcomes." It says, "I value my peace more than momentary validation." This is not about being passive. It's about being precise, choosing your moments, guarding your energy, living from principle instead of provocation. When you do that, you stop fighting shadows and start walking steadily forward. Silence, used wisely, becomes a mirror. Others see themselves more clearly in it, and eventually, truth speaks, not loudly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. All you had to do was stay still long enough to let it happen. You don't always need the last word. You don't always need to explain yourself. And you don't always need to fight every battle placed in front of you. Silence, when chosen consciously, is not weakness, it's power under control. It's the quiet confidence that says, I trust time, truth, and consequence to do what my ego doesn't need to. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding chaos. When you stop chasing validation, you start commanding respect. And when you step back, karma steps forward. Remember this: people reveal who they are without you saying a word. Situations resolve themselves when you refuse to interfere emotionally. And outcomes often favor the calm observer, not the loud participant. So the next time you feel the urge to defend, argue, or prove, pause, breathe, choose silence. Let your composure speak louder than any argument ever could. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on where silence could bring you peace, power, or clarity. And if you want more Stoic wisdom that sharpens your mind, strengthens your discipline, and elevates your presence, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us. Because sometimes the most powerful move you can make is saying nothing at all. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. What if I told you that the person who hurt you doesn't need confrontation, anger, or explanations to feel small? They only need to see what you become after the pain. What if the very thing you've been trying to do, prove your worth, demand closure, seek justice, is the one thing silently giving them power over you? You've been wronged, disrespected, maybe underestimated, and a part of you wants them to feel it, to realize what they lost, to regret how they treated you. That desire is human, but Stoic wisdom reveals something far more effective than revenge, far more devastating than words or reactions. It shows you how to reclaim your dignity without begging for validation, how to rise so calmly that their impact on you disappears. This video is not about hurting back. It's about mastering yourself so completely that the one who tried to break you becomes irrelevant in your presence. When you understand this, their memory loses its weight, and your silence becomes louder than any argument. Watch this video till the very end, because each principle builds on the last. Miss one and you miss the transformation. Stay with me, and you'll walk away stronger, calmer, and untouchable. Number 1. Withdraw emotional reactions completely. Withdrawing emotional reactions completely is not coldness. It's not suppression. It's not pretending you don't feel anything. It's clarity. It's deciding that your inner world is no longer available for someone else to disturb. Most people think power comes from making others feel your pain. Stoicism teaches something far more unsettling and far more effective. Real power comes from removing yourself as a source of emotional supply. Said it plainly, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The moment you stop reacting emotionally, the balance shifts, quietly, permanently. When someone hurts you, they are often feeding on response. Not logic, not outcomes, response. Emotion is confirmation. Anger confirms relevance. Hurt confirms access. Explanation confirms influence. When you withdraw emotional reactions, you remove the reward system entirely. You're no longer participating in the exchange. This isn't revenge. It's independence. And independence is destabilizing to anyone who expected control over your inner state. This requires a shift in how you see emotion. Emotions are not orders, they are signals. Epictetus reminded us it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The Stoic move is not to deny the signal but to refuse to obey it automatically. You feel the surge and you pause. You notice the tightening, the impulse to speak, to defend, to show pain. And then you choose stillness, not because you're weak, because you're disciplined. At first, this will feel unnatural. Your mind will argue that silence equals loss, that calm equals surrender. That's conditioning speaking. You've been trained to believe that expression equals strength. Stoicism rewires that belief. Strength is restraint. Strength is choosing not to give your energy away just because someone tried to provoke it. Seneca warned, "He who avenges himself by yielding to anger keeps his enemy alive." Emotional reactions keep the wound open. Withdrawal lets it close. This doesn't mean becoming numb. It means becoming selective. You stop narrating your inner state to the outside world. You stop explaining how you feel. You stop performing pain. Instead, you process internally, privately, deliberately. You don't rush to resolution. You don't rush to closure. You let time and silence do the work. And that alone makes the other person feel small, not because you attacked them, but because you no longer orbit them. To train this, you need practice that starts before the trigger. Begin with emotional labeling. When a feeling rises, name it silently, not dramatically, just accurately. Anger, disappointment, resentment. Then add one sentence in your mind, "This is a feeling, not a command." That single line creates space. In that space, you breathe slower, your face relaxes, your body settles. You are no longer leaking emotion outward. This is Stoic control in real time. Another exercise is response delay. Commit to never reacting immediately when emotionally charged. Not minutes, not hours, just a pause long enough to regain authorship. Advise, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Immediate reactions are mimicry. Delayed responses are authorship. Often, after the pause, you'll realize no response is needed at all. Silence becomes your statement. You'll notice something else as you withdraw emotionally. Your thoughts become cleaner. Without the urge to react, your mind sharpens. You see patterns more clearly. You stop personalizing behavior that was never about you. This is Stoic detachment, not indifference, but perspective. Epictetus urged, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." Emotional withdrawal is embodiment. You don't announce it, you live it. There will be moments when the urge to re-engage returns. That's normal. The habit of reaction doesn't die quietly. When it happens, redirect your energy inward. Physical stillness helps. Relax your jaw, drop your shoulders, slow your breath. These are not tricks. They're signals to your nervous system that you're safe without reacting. Over time, your body learns that calm is an option, then a default. Another discipline is journaling without narrative. Write only sensations and thoughts, not stories. No blame, no justification, just observation. This trains your mind to process emotion without dramatizing it. You're teaching yourself that feelings don't need an audience to dissolve. Seneca believed daily reflection was essential, writing, "Each day I sit in judgment on myself." This is that judgment, not harsh, but honest. What makes this approach so effective is that it's invisible. There's no confrontation to push against, no emotion to mirror, no drama to escalate. You become unreadable, and unreadability unsettles those who expected access. You're no longer explaining yourself. You're no longer trying to be understood. You understand yourself. That's enough. This is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it's about appearing unaffected. It's not. It's about being unaffected by things that don't deserve control over you. You still care. You still feel. But you choose where your energy goes. You don't pour it into places that proved unworthy. That choice is dignity. Adopt this as a daily vow. I do not react for entertainment, validation, or relief. Relief gained through reaction is temporary. Relief gained through restraint is lasting. Each time you withdraw emotionally, you reinforce your self-respect. And self-respect is felt by others even when nothing is said. The final exercise is commitment to inner authority. When hurt arises, ask yourself one question: who decides how I feel right now? If the answer isn't me, pause until it is. This question recenters you instantly. It restores control. Wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Change the estimate, withdraw the reaction, keep the power. This is how you make the one who hurt you feel small, not through cruelty, but through absence. Not through punishment, but through peace. You don't need to prove strength. You practice it. You don't seek closure. You become closed to intrusion. Start today, react less. Observe more. Guard your inner world like it matters, because it does. Number 2, refuse to seek closure or explanations. Refusing to seek closure or explanations feels counterintuitive at first, because your mind has been trained to believe that understanding is what heals you. You think if you just hear the right words, if you finally get the truth, if they explain themselves clearly enough, something inside you will settle. But Stoicism cuts through that illusion with ruthless calm. Wrote, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. Closure is often just another form of dependence. It keeps your peace tied to someone else's willingness to speak, clarify, or care. When you refuse to chase it, you quietly take your power back. You don't need their version of events to move forward. You don't need their apology to regain your dignity. And you definitely don't need their explanation to validate what you already felt. Seeking closure places them above you, as if they are the final authority on your emotional state. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Epictetus was blunt about this. If you want to be invincible, make sure that no one can hurt you by what they say or do. The moment you stop asking, why, you begin building that invincibility. You stop handing them the pen to write the ending of your story. There's something deeply unsettling to the person who hurt you when you no longer ask questions. Not because you're trying to punish them, but because you've removed yourself from the emotional transaction altogether. Silence replaces interrogation. Detachment replaces pleading. And this isn't coldness, it's clarity. You are saying without words, I don't need you to understand me for me to understand myself. That shift alone changes everything. Your energy turns inward. Your focus sharpens. You stop replaying conversations that never happened and start reclaiming the time they occupied rent-free in your mind. Your mind will resist this at first. It will demand answers. It will manufacture scenarios and imaginary dialogues. Let that happen without indulging it. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress thoughts, it asks you to see them clearly. Seneca warned, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Closure-seeking is imagination disguised as healing. It's the hope that one more exchange will erase the discomfort. Instead, choose discipline. When the urge to reach out appears, pause, breathe. Remind yourself that peace delayed by dependence is not peace at all. A powerful practice here is mental refusal. Each time your mind says, I need to know why, you calmly answer, I don't. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just firmly. This is training. You are rewiring your relationship with uncertainty. Another exercise is writing questions down and deliberately not answering them. Let them exist without resolution. This strengthens your tolerance for ambiguity, which is a core Stoic skill. Life rarely provides clean endings. The Stoic doesn't wait for them. When you stop seeking closure, something unexpected happens. You stop shrinking yourself. You no longer frame your healing around their behavior. You're not waiting for them to say the right thing so you can finally exhale. You exhale now, on your terms. Reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Closure is an outside event. Strength comes from refusing to hinge your well-being on it. This doesn't mean pretending you weren't hurt. It means you stop outsourcing your recovery. You acknowledge what happened without dissecting it endlessly. You feel the emotion without dramatizing it. You move forward without dragging the past behind you like proof. Refusing explanations is an act of self-respect. It tells your nervous system that you are safe even without answers, that you trust yourself enough to walk on without permission. Another daily habit to build is response restraint. When the impulse to ask, explain, or clarify arises, do nothing for 24 hours. Let the feeling pass through you. Most urges dissolve when not fed. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." You don't announce your detachment, you live it. Over time, the silence you maintain becomes louder than any explanation ever could. What makes the one who hurt you feel small is not revenge, confrontation, or emotional display. It's your refusal to orbit them. When you stop seeking closure, you remove the spotlight. You are no longer a question mark waiting for their answer. You become a period, complete, unavailable. That quiet finality unsettles people far more than anger ever will because it signals independence. And independence is the one thing they cannot control. Train yourself to end inner conversations abruptly. When you catch yourself rehearsing what you'd say if you had the chance, stop mid-sentence. Return to your body, feel your breath, ground yourself in the present. This is Stoic attention training. You're choosing reality over rumination. You're choosing growth over rehearsal. Refusing closure is not avoidance. It's acceptance without attachment. It's understanding that not everything needs to make sense to be released. Seneca wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Stop suffering in advance of explanations that may never come. Let go without answers. Heal without permission. Move forward without applause. This is how you reclaim your scale. You don't chase. You don't ask. You don't wait. You stand intact, self-governed, and calm. And in doing so, you don't just feel stronger, you become untouchable. Number 3, master silence instead of defending yourself. When someone hurts you, the first instinct is to explain yourself, to correct the record, to make sure they understand your side. That impulse feels noble, even necessary. But Stoicism cuts against that reflex with unsettling clarity. Wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." The moment you rush to defend yourself, you silently accept the accusation as something that needs an answer. Silence, on the other hand, refuses that premise. It says, without drama, that your worth is not on trial, and that quiet refusal is what shrinks the other person's power. Mastering silence doesn't mean swallowing emotion or pretending you're unaffected. It means you stop leaking your energy into a space that doesn't deserve it. When you defend yourself, you give the other person control over the frame. You react. You chase. You try to be understood. Silence reverses that direction. You remain still. You let the moment sit. You stay rooted in yourself. Epictetus was blunt about this. If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." That's not sarcasm. That's inner freedom. You don't owe explanations to people who chose to misunderstand you. Defending yourself often comes from a hidden hope that if you say the right words, the pain will dissolve. Stoicism teaches you to give that hope up, not in a bitter way, but in a grounded one. You stop trying to control how you are perceived. Seneca warned, "He who explains himself accuses himself." When you internalize that, silence stops feeling like weakness and starts feeling like self-respect. This kind of silence is active, not passive. You are not shrinking. You are holding your ground. You are choosing not to engage in emotional bargaining. The person who hurt you expects a reaction: anger, justification, pleading, defense. Silence denies them that reward. It doesn't humiliate them outwardly. It does something quieter and far more unsettling. It forces them to sit alone with their own actions, without you propping the moment up with your energy. To build this habit, you need to train yourself before the moment arrives. Start by noticing how often you narrate yourself internally. The mind rehearses defenses constantly. Catch that. When you feel the urge to explain, pause and ask yourself one simple question: what would change if I said nothing? Most of the time, the honest answer is nothing that matters. This pause is where mastery begins. You're not suppressing speech, you're choosing restraint. Practice deliberate non-response in low emotional moments. Let messages go unanswered for a few minutes longer than feels comfortable. Let silence exist without rushing to fix it. Sit with the sensation. You'll notice a kind of pressure, like an itch. That's the ego wanting relief. Don't scratch it. Breathe. Feel your body. You are learning to stay sovereign under tension. Reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Silence is how that power shows up in real time. There's another layer to this. Defending yourself often keeps you psychologically tied to the person who hurt you. Your thoughts orbit them. Silence loosens that grip. It redirects your attention inward. You stop negotiating your identity with someone who has already proven unreliable. This is not avoidance. It's detachment with dignity. Stoicism never asks you to pretend pain doesn't exist. It asks you not to let pain dictate your behavior. A practical exercise: commit to a 24-hour rule. When you feel attacked or misrepresented, do nothing for a full day. No clarifying statements. No inner monologues rehearsing speeches. Just observe. Journal if you need to, but don't send anything outward. At the end of those 24 hours, ask yourself whether silence weakened you or steadied you. You'll likely find that your emotions have cooled and your perspective has widened. Often, the urge to defend simply dissolves. Another practice is mental reframing. When you're criticized, repeat this line from Epictetus: "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." The hurt comes not from the words, but from the meaning you assign to them. Silence creates space to question that meaning. You stop treating every judgment as a verdict. You remember that opinions are cheap and abundant. Your character is not. Over time, mastering silence changes how you carry yourself. You become less reactive, more deliberate. You stop chasing closure from people who lack the capacity to give it. And paradoxically, this calm restraint often has the effect you never get from arguing. It unsettles. Not because you're trying to make anyone feel small, but because you no longer make yourself small by pleading to be understood. Seneca put it cleanly: the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Silence is delay refined into a discipline. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you speak from choice, not compulsion. When you do respond, if you ever do, your words are sparse and grounded. They come from clarity, not wounded pride. But even if no words ever come, you are intact. You've kept your center. Make this a daily practice. Notice your impulses. Slow them down. Let silence be your default instead of defense. You are not obligated to perform emotional labor for those who hurt you. Your calm is not indifference, it's self-command. And as advised, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Sometimes being one means saying nothing at all. Number 4, improve quietly without announcing it. Improving quietly is one of the most underestimated forms of strength you can cultivate. When you've been hurt, every instinct inside you wants to prove something. You want recognition. You want validation. You want the other person to see what they did wrong and what you've become despite it. Stoicism asks you to go in the opposite direction. Wrote, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Quiet improvement is exactly that. No speeches. No announcements. No dramatic transformation arc performed for an audience. Just steady, private progress that compounds while no one is watching. Here's the truth you're rarely told. Announcing your growth dilutes it. The moment you talk about what you're becoming, you start feeding your ego instead of your character. You trade momentum for applause. Stoicism teaches you to starve that impulse. Not because recognition is evil, but because dependence on it makes you weak. When you improve quietly, your power stays intact. You don't leak energy into explanations. You don't seek permission. You move forward while others are still stuck replaying the past. Seneca warned, associate with people who are likely to improve you. Quiet improvement starts with choosing yourself as that person. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop fantasizing about reactions. You redirect that mental energy into discipline. This is where real leverage is built, not in being seen, but in becoming undeniable. When progress happens in silence, it's rooted deeper. It's not performative, it's integrated. You don't improve quietly to make someone feel small directly. That's not the point. You do it because detachment is the ultimate response to disrespect. When you no longer need acknowledgement, you reclaim control. Epictetus said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" That mindset requires inner strength. Quiet improvement builds that strength daily. The discipline here is restraint. Restraint from posting, explaining, hinting, or signaling. You let results mature in the dark. This is uncomfortable at first. Silence can feel like invisibility, but invisibility is where focus thrives. You're no longer splitting attention between growth and performance. You're fully invested, and that investment shows up in your posture, your tone, your decisions, without you saying a word. Start by creating a private standard. Write down what better means to you, but keep it hidden. Not because it's shameful, but because it's sacred. Kept his meditations private, never intending them for publication. That alone should teach you something. Improvement doesn't need witnesses to be real. Each day, ask yourself one simple question. Did I act in alignment with my standard today? That's it. No comparison, no scoreboard. Another practice is deliberate silence about your efforts. When you feel the urge to share progress, pause, sit with the urge. Notice how quickly the mind seeks external confirmation, then redirect. Use that moment to refine your habit instead. One extra repetition, one more page, one more breath of patience. This is how you train emotional independence. You're teaching yourself that progress is its own reward. Quiet improvement also sharpens your composure. When you're no longer trying to prove anything, your reactions slow down. You become less reactive, less defensive. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Quiet growth is delayed gratification in its form. You're willing to let time reveal who you've become instead of forcing a reveal yourself. You'll notice something subtle as you continue. The memory of being hurt loses its grip, not because you suppressed it, but because you outgrew it. Pain thrives on attention. When your focus shifts to refinement, pain has less oxygen. You're not healing through distraction. You're healing through elevation. You become too engaged in becoming better to stay emotionally entangled with the past. A powerful exercise here is the end-of-day review. Before sleep, replay the day not to judge, but to observe. Where did you act with discipline? Where did you slip into ego? Where did silence serve you? This mirrors a practice recommended by both Seneca and Epictetus. It keeps you accountable to yourself, not to anyone else's expectations. Another exercise is intentional anonymity. Do good work that no one can trace back to you, not for moral superiority, but to strengthen your internal compass. When you remove the possibility of praise, you find out whether your actions are truly yours. This builds integrity, and integrity radiates quietly. Improving without announcing it changes how you carry yourself. You speak with less urgency. You explain less. You move with certainty that doesn't need reinforcement. This is what makes the one who hurt you feel small, not humiliation, not revenge, but irrelevance. Your life no longer orbits around the injury. You've shifted the center back to yourself. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Notice the order. No declaration to the world, just a private decision followed by consistent action. That's Stoic power. That's quiet dominance. So start now. Pick one area of your life and commit to improving it in silence. No updates, no hints, no seeking reassurance. Let time do the revealing. Let your calm replace your resentment. Let your discipline replace your anger. And when results finally show, they won't need explanation. They'll speak on your behalf, softly, firmly, and without asking permission. Number 5, deny them access to your inner world. Denying someone access to your inner world is not cruelty, it is clarity. When someone has hurt you, the instinct is to either explain yourself endlessly or to shut down in bitterness. Stoicism offers a quieter, sharper path. Wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Your inner world is that power. Your thoughts, values, emotions, and meaning-making process are not public property. The moment you stop handing them out to those who mishandled them, something inside you straightens. You're no longer reacting, you're choosing. Most people reveal too much too quickly to the wrong audience. They narrate their wounds, expose their doubts, and then wonder why they feel drained afterward. You don't need to do that anymore. Denying access doesn't mean becoming cold or withdrawn. It means becoming selective. You stop offering explanations to people who are not aligned with your values. You stop leaking emotional data to those who use it carelessly. Epictetus warned, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Silence, restraint, and composure speak far louder than emotional disclosure ever could. When someone can no longer read you, predict you, or press emotional buttons, their influence shrinks. Not because you're trying to make them feel small, but because you've reclaimed your center. Stoicism is not about revenge. It's about independence. Seneca said, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." Denying access to your inner world is self-rule in action. You are no longer inviting others to sit in the control room of your mind. This requires discipline. Your mind will want to revisit the hurt, rehearse arguments, and seek validation. Catch that impulse gently. Ask yourself whether sharing this thought strengthens you or weakens you. If it weakens you, keep it private. This is not suppression, it's containment. You're choosing when and where your inner life is expressed. That choice builds dignity. Practice pausing before you reveal how you feel. Take a breath. Feel the urge pass. You're training yourself to respond, not spill. A powerful exercise is mental boundary setting. Each morning, remind yourself, not everyone deserves access to my thoughts, my emotions, or my plans. Write it down if you need to. Another practice is emotional minimalism. When you speak, say only what is necessary. No extra justification. No over-explaining. This doesn't make you distant. It makes you grounded. People sense when you are no longer emotionally available for manipulation. Advised, be reserved and never overfamiliar. This is not about isolation, it's about proportion. Your inner world is sacred space. When you protect it, you move differently. You stop seeking reactions. You stop craving acknowledgement. You stop trying to be understood by those who have already shown they don't understand you. That's freedom. There's a subtle confidence that comes from emotional privacy. You become harder to shake because your worth is no longer negotiated externally. When someone realizes they can't get inside your head, can't provoke a reaction, can't extract emotional fuel, their presence loses weight. You don't need to announce boundaries. Your composure enforces them. To strengthen this habit, practice journaling instead of verbal processing. Let your thoughts exist on paper rather than in the hands of others. Another exercise is the delayed response. When you feel the urge to explain yourself, wait 24 hours before saying anything. Often, the need dissolves. What remains is clarity. Epictetus reminded us, if anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." This mindset comes from an inner world that is fortified, not exposed. You are no longer porous. You are self-contained. Denying access is not punishment, it's alignment. You're choosing peace over performance, self-respect over emotional exposure. And in that choice, something powerful happens. You stop shrinking to be understood. You expand by standing still. Start today. Guard your inner world, speak less. Reveal slowly. Let your strength become quiet and watch how unimportant the hurt becomes when it no longer has a doorway into you. Number 6, respond with calm indifference, not hostility. Responding with calm indifference rather than hostility is one of the most difficult shifts you'll ever make and one of the most powerful. Your instinct wants to flare up. It wants to correct, confront, punish, or prove. That impulse feels justified, it feels human. But Stoicism invites you to step back and ask a harder question: who controls you in that moment? Wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Calm indifference is what that strength looks like in motion. It's not coldness, it's sovereignty. Hostility keeps you tethered to the one who hurt you. Every sharp thought, every imagined reply, every emotional surge keeps them central in your inner world. Indifference quietly removes them from the throne. When you respond without heat, without edge, without urgency, something shifts. Not outwardly at first, but internally. You stop feeding the wound. You stop rehearsing pain. You stop giving your nervous system the message that you're under threat. This is not weakness. This is containment. And containment is power. Stoicism never asked you to suppress emotion. It asked you to discipline it. Epictetus was clear. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Calm indifference is the refusal to accept the story your emotions are trying to sell you. The story that says you must react. You don't. You choose otherwise. You let the feeling pass through without giving it a megaphone. That choice, repeated, rewires you. When you respond with hostility, you escalate. When you respond with indifference, you de-escalate without retreating. You don't explain yourself. You don't justify your stance. You don't seek understanding or validation. You simply remain unmoved. That stillness communicates something words never could. I am not governed by this. Seneca said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Indifference is not delay forever. It's delay long enough for clarity to arrive. You need to train this, not theoretically, practically. Start by practicing internal indifference before external indifference. When a surge of anger rises, don't label it as bad. Label it as temporary. Say to yourself, this is a sensation, not a command. Breathe slowly. Drop your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Let your body learn that it is safe even when disrespected. This is a radical act. Most people never do it. That's why most people stay reactive. Calm indifference also starves the ego of drama. Hostility feels satisfying because it gives the ego a stage. Indifference removes the audience. And without an audience, ego loses interest. Warned, how much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks. Indifference is time reclaimed, energy reclaimed, focus reclaimed. To make this a habit, rehearse stillness. Sit quietly each day and imagine emotional pressure without adding narrative. Don't visualize scenes or people, just feel resistance and practice staying relaxed. This builds emotional endurance. Another exercise is deliberate understatement. When you speak, use fewer words than necessary, not curt, just precise. This trains your mind to stop overinvesting. Silence becomes a tool, not a defense. What makes indifference so disarming is that it denies emotional leverage. Hostility invites counter-hostility. Indifference offers nothing to grab onto. It creates asymmetry. You're no longer playing the same game, and people feel that. You're not trying to look strong. You are strong because your inner state isn't up for negotiation. There will be moments when this feels unnatural. Good. Growth always does. Stoicism is not about comfort, it's about alignment. Seneca wrote, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Hostility is pre-suffering. Indifference waits for reality to prove that suffering is even required. Most of the time, it is. You are not here to teach lessons. You are here to preserve your equilibrium. When you stop trying to make others feel something and focus on maintaining your own steadiness, you win quietly. Indifference isn't apathy, it's selectivity. You choose where your emotional currency goes, and you stop spending it on those who can't return value. Adopt this as a daily discipline. When provoked, pause, breathe, respond minimally or not at all. Let your tone remain even. Let your posture remain relaxed. Let your eyes stay calm. This is Stoic composure made visible. Over time, your nervous system learns that it doesn't need to defend your worth. You already know it. In the end, calm indifference doesn't make others small by force. It makes them irrelevant by choice. And nothing unsettles the ego more than being significant. You don't need revenge. You need mastery. Start practicing today. Withdraw your emotional investment. Guard your inner state. And let your calm do what anger never could. Number 7, let time expose character, yours and theirs. Let time expose character, yours and theirs. This is one of the hardest Stoic disciplines because it demands restraint when every instinct in you wants release. When someone hurts you, the urge to react feels righteous. You want to correct the record, reclaim dignity, restore balance immediately. But Stoicism asks you to step back and trust something far more powerful than retaliation, time paired with self-command. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That line isn't poetic comfort, it's instruction. It tells you that your transformation, not your response, is where the real shift happens. Time is uncomfortable because it refuses to hurry for your emotions. It stretches moments out and forces you to sit with what you feel. But that waiting is not passive, it's active restraint. When you choose not to react, not to explain, not to chase closure, you're allowing patterns to surface naturally. Character cannot hide forever, neither theirs nor yours. You don't need to expose anyone. Behavior does that on its own. Epictetus warned, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Waiting breaks that complicity. You reclaim authorship over your inner world. Here's the quiet truth most people miss. Reacting quickly often shrinks you more than the original wound ever could. It ties your sense of worth to someone else's actions. Time, on the other hand, loosens that grip. It gives you distance, and distance gives you clarity. You begin to see what was said, what was done, and more importantly, what it had to do with you. Usually far less than you thought. Seneca observed, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Time dissolves exaggeration. It leaves only what's real. As days pass, something subtle happens inside you if you let it. The emotional charge fades, the urgency quiets, and in that calmer space, your character has room to emerge. Are you disciplined? Are you consistent? Are you grounded in your values even when no one is watching? This is where the real work is. You stop measuring progress by how they feel and start measuring it by how you behave. That shift alone changes everything. You're no longer performing strength, you're practicing it. Letting time pass also removes the need to convince anyone of your side. Stoicism never asks you to prove yourself. It asks you to be aligned. Reminded himself, "I do what is mine to do, the rest does not disturb me." When you live that way, you stop narrating your pain. You stop replaying scenes in your head. You redirect that energy into refinement. Time becomes an ally because you're using it to build, not brood. To adopt this habit, start with a simple rule: no emotional decisions. When you feel the pull to act, delay. Not indefinitely, intentionally. Tell yourself you'll revisit the thought tomorrow, then again in a week. Watch how its intensity changes. Most impulses don't survive time. This is a practical exercise in Stoic patience. Another practice is journaling without judgment. Write what you feel, then write what you choose to do instead. You're training separation between emotion and action. Time also exposes consistency. Anyone can appear convincing in a moment. Over time, masks slip. You don't need to watch closely or wait eagerly. Live fully in your own lane. As Seneca said, time discovers truth. That discovery happens whether you're present for it or not. The more you detach from the outcome, the more clearly you see it when it arrives. And when it does, it often arrives quietly. There's also a deeper layer here. Letting time expose character isn't about making someone else feel small through comparison. It's about standing so firmly in your values that contrast becomes inevitable. You don't diminish anyone, you elevate yourself. That elevation can feel unsettling to others, but that's not your concern. Your concern is integrity. Epictetus taught, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Time gives you the space to live that out. Practice intentional silence during emotional waves, not suppression, containment. Breathe, observe, let thoughts pass without attaching to them. This trains emotional endurance. Another exercise is daily reflection. Ask yourself one question each night. Did my actions today reflect who I want to be, regardless of how others behaved? That question keeps you honest. It keeps the focus where it belongs. Over time, you'll notice something empowering. The wound loses its authority. It no longer dictates your mood or your direction. You've it. And in that growth, you don't need acknowledgement. You don't need apology. You don't even need understanding. Wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Time lets you choose the color deliberately. This is Stoic strength. Quiet, unrushed, unprovoked. You let time do the revealing while you do the refining. And in that process, without confrontation or display, you become unshakable. That is how you reclaim power, not by forcing outcomes, but by trusting duration. Start now. Pause longer, act slower, build deeper. Let time speak. Number 8, replace resentment with disciplined self-control. Resentment feels powerful at first. It gives you the illusion of strength, the sense that you're holding someone accountable in your mind. But look closer and you'll see the truth the Stoics understood centuries ago. Resentment doesn't punish the person who hurt you, it chains you to them. Put it plainly, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. That line isn't poetic comfort, it's a command. If you continue to replay the wound, rehearse the injustice, and feed the anger, you remain under their influence. Disciplined self-control is how you cut the cord, not by suppressing emotion, but by governing it. You don't replace resentment by pretending it doesn't exist. You replace it by refusing to let it steer you. Resentment is reactive. Self-control is deliberate. One keeps you stuck in the past, the other pulls you into authorship of your present. Epictetus reminded us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That's not motivational fluff. That's operational guidance. Every time resentment flares, you're being invited to either relapse into reaction or practice command. And command is learned through repetition, not insight. Here, where the shift begins. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You train yourself to ask, what is within my control right now? That single question dissolves resentment's grip because resentment thrives on helplessness. The Stoic mind doesn't negotiate with helplessness. It redirects energy. You don't need closure, you need containment. The moment you choose restraint over retaliation, internally or externally, you begin shrinking the psychological space the other person occupies in your mind. That's how they start to feel small, without you lifting a finger. Self-control is not passive. It's an active refusal to be dragged into emotional excess. Seneca warned, anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. Notice the word restrained, not erased, not restrained. You allow the emotion to rise, then you deny it the wheel. This takes practice, and the practice itself is what rebuilds your sense of power. Start with awareness drills. When resentment appears, don't narrate it, don't justify it, label it. Silently say, "This is resentment." That creates distance. Distance creates choice. Then slow your breath deliberately. Long inhale, longer exhale. You are teaching your nervous system that you are not under threat. This matters because resentment is often stored tension masquerading as moral outrage. Release the tension and the story loses fuel. Next, impose a rule on yourself. No internal monologues about the person who hurt you unless they directly serve your growth. This is discipline. Wrote his meditations not for publication but as a form of mental hygiene. You need the same. When your mind drifts toward replay, redirect it toward refinement. Ask, what virtue is this moment training in me? Patience, endurance, detachment. This reframing doesn't excuse harm. It neutralizes obsession. There's a deeper layer here most people miss. Resentment keeps you emotionally invested in someone who no longer deserves access. Self-control is how you revoke that access. Not dramatically, quietly. You stop giving them free rent in your thoughts. Epictetus advised, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. What's in your power is your conduct, your habits, your standards. What's not is their behavior. Once you internalize this distinction, resentment starts to feel unnecessary, even embarrassing. Train self-control through voluntary discomfort. This is classic Stoic conditioning. Choose small acts of restraint daily, delay gratification, sit with silence, hold back unnecessary speech. These are not punishments, they are strength drills. Each time you practice restraint in neutral situations, you build capacity for emotional restraint when it counts. The mind doesn't rise to the occasion, it falls to the level of its training. You'll notice something subtle as you persist. The memory of the hurt loses emotional charge, not because you forgave in some performative way, but because you outgrew the need to react. Seneca said, "He suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary." Resentment is premature suffering. Self-control is delayed judgment. And delayed judgment often reveals that the wound had less power than you assumed. Another exercise, write down what resentment urges you to do, then write the opposite action that aligns with self-mastery. Not kindness, not reconciliation, mastery. The goal is not to be morally impressive. The goal is to be unshakable. When you consistently choose the disciplined response, you reinforce an identity, someone who governs himself. And people who govern themselves are never small. The final shift is internal posture. Stop seeking emotional vindication. You don't need them to feel guilty. You don't need acknowledgement. Wanting those things keeps you dependent. Reminded himself, I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others. Self-control reclaims your opinion as the authority. When you replace resentment with disciplined self-control, something paradoxical happens. You don't feel triumphant. You feel calm, grounded, clean. And that calm is what makes the other person irrelevant. Not defeated, irrelevant. That is the quiet outcome Stoicism aims for. Not revenge, freedom. So start now. Catch the resentment, name it, restrain it. Redirect your energy into habits that sharpen you. You don't win by making noise. You win by becoming unreachable. Number 9, stop replaying the offense in your mind. The moment someone hurts you, your mind wants to keep the wound open. It replays the words, the tone, the timing, over and over, as if repetition will somehow fix what already happened. But warned you about this trap long ago when he wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Every time you replay the offense, you let the other person stay in control, not in the world, but in you. And that is the real loss. You think replaying gives you leverage. It doesn't. It drains you. The mind convinces itself that revisiting the moment is preparation, that you're staying alert, that you're protecting yourself. In truth, you're handing over your energy again and again. Epictetus was blunt about this. It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. The event is finished, completely done. What keeps hurting you is the story you keep pressing play on. And the person who hurt you grows larger in your mind while you shrink. Here's the shift you need to make, and it's uncomfortable at first. You stop entertaining the replay, not by force, not by pretending it didn't matter, but by refusing to give it free rent in your head. You don't argue with the memory. You don't analyze it. You don't polish it. You notice it and you cut the loop. Calmly, repeatedly, every time. This is Stoic discipline in real time. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Read that again, slowly. Most of the pain you feel now is not coming from what happened, but from what you keep doing with it. Each replay sharpens the edge. Each replay rehearses powerlessness. If you want the one who hurt you to feel small, not outwardly, but in the only way that matters, you make them irrelevant to your inner life. This requires a new habit. When the replay starts, you interrupt it with intention. You don't wait for it to finish. You don't let it build momentum. You step in early. You say internally and firmly, "This thought no longer serves me." Not angrily, not dramatically, just decisively. Then you redirect your attention to something physical and immediate. Your breath, your posture, the sensation of your feet on the ground. This anchors you back into the present where the offense has no power. You'll notice resistance. Your mind will say, "But it matters." Yes, it mattered, past tense. Stoicism never asks you to deny reality. It asks you to stop bleeding from it. Reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The replay is an outside event pretending to be a current one. You don't have to obey it. Another exercise that works quietly but powerfully is this. Set a mental boundary. Decide that you will not replay the offense outside of a specific limited window, 5 minutes a day maximum. When the thought appears at other times, you postpone it. You say, "Not now." Most days, when that window arrives, you won't even want to use it. The mind loses interest when obsession is no longer allowed to roam freely. Control weakens fixation. Understand this clearly. Replaying the offense keeps you emotionally tied to the person who hurt you. Detachment is not coldness, it is freedom. Epictetus said, "If you want to be invincible, make no treaty with anything that is not in your control." Their behavior is not in your control. Your attention is. Every time you withdraw it from the replay, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You may fear that letting go means they get away with it. That's the ego talking. Stoicism is not about revenge. It's about superiority of character. The greatest consequence you can impose is indifference. When someone no longer occupies your inner space, they are diminished. Not by force, by absence. Practice mental labeling. When the replay begins, label it plainly. Memory, not truth, not danger, just memory. This creates distance. You stop merging with the thought. You observe it like a cloud passing. Seneca advised, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Don't suffer twice, once in reality and endlessly in recollection. There will be moments when the mind tries to seduce you back into the loop. It will replay different angles, different endings, imagined responses. Don't follow. Each time you refuse, you strengthen self-command. This is training. Quiet, repetitive, effective. You are teaching your mind who leads. Replace the replay with construction, not distraction, construction. Use the freed mental space to build something internal, stronger standards, sharper discipline, deeper calm. Ask yourself one question when the thought arises. What would a composed version of me focus on right now? Then act accordingly. Action grounds you. Rumination dissolves. often reminded himself of the brevity of life. Soon you will have forgotten everything. Soon everyone will have forgotten you. This isn't nihilism, it's perspective. The offense feels enormous now because you're standing too close to it. Step back. Time shrinks everything. You don't need to carry this forward. Make a commitment today, not to forget, but to stop feeding. Every replay is a choice, even if it doesn't feel like one yet. Train yourself until it does. The moment you stop replaying the offense, something subtle but profound happens. You grow quieter, clearer, harder to disturb. And the one who hurt you, they fade, not because they changed, but because you did. That is Stoic victory. Number 10, live so well that their absence becomes irrelevant. Living so well that their absence becomes irrelevant is not revenge, it's release. It's the quiet decision to stop orbiting around a wound and start building gravity of your own. Right now, part of your energy may still be tied to what happened, to what was said or not said, to what you wish they understood. Stoicism asks you to cut that cord, not with anger but with elevation. Wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Notice how he didn't say the loudest revenge or the most visible one. He said the best, and the best is internal. It's you refusing to let someone else rent space in your mind without paying. You don't heal by waiting for closure. You heal by making their relevance expire. That happens when your days become full, intentional, and directed by your values instead of your resentment. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus warned, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" There's humor in that, but also power. You stop shrinking yourself to be understood. You grow beyond the need to be explained. Living well starts with reclaiming your mornings. How you begin the day sets the tone for how much control you hand over. Before you reach for distractions, take 5 minutes of stillness. Ask yourself one simple question: what would a disciplined, self-respecting version of me do today? Write the answer down, not 10 things. 1. Then do it without negotiation. This is how you rebuild trust with yourself. And when you trust yourself, the opinions of those who hurt you start to fade. There's a temptation to improve yourself at someone as if your growth is a performance meant to be noticed. Drop that impulse. Seneca said, "He who does not know what the world is does not know where he is, and he who does not know for what purpose he is in the world does not know who he is." Your purpose is not to prove a point, it's to live in alignment. When your actions line up with your values consistently, your life becomes quieter, stronger, less reactive. Their absence stops feeling like a loss and starts feeling like space. You also need to starve the habit of mental replay. The mind loves to revisit old scenes, hopping to rewrite them. Catch yourself when this happens, not with frustration, with firmness. Say internally, "This thought is unproductive." Then redirect your attention to something physical: your breath, your posture, the task in front of you. This is a Stoic exercise in attention control. Reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Each time you interrupt rumination, you reclaim power. Another habit to build is voluntary discomfort. Comfort keeps old attachments alive. Discomfort breaks them. Choose small acts of discipline daily. Cold water, silence, focused work without escape. These are not punishments. They are reminders that you are capable of choosing difficulty now to avoid suffering later. When you grow comfortable with effort, you stop craving validation. And when validation loses its pull, the people who once hurt you lose their leverage. Living well also means refining your standards, not for others, for yourself. What behavior will you no longer tolerate from your own mind? Self-pity, fantasizing about being understood, waiting to feel motivated. Cut those off gently but decisively. Epictetus was blunt. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. You don't wait to feel ready. You act your way into clarity. There will be moments when you feel the urge to check if they noticed your progress. That's normal. Don't judge it, just don't obey it. Each time you resist, you strengthen independence. Your life is not a message, it's a practice. The goal is not to look unbothered, it's to be unbothered. And that only happens when your attention is invested forward, not backward. Here's a practical exercise. Write a short list titled "What I Control." Keep it simple: your actions, your effort, your integrity, your time. Read it every morning for a week. Then write another list titled "What I Release." Put their name there if you need to. Then put expectations, apologies, explanations, and imagined outcomes underneath. This is not symbolic fluff. It's cognitive training. You are teaching your mind where to invest energy and where to withdraw it. As you live better, something subtle shifts. You stop needing them to feel small because you stop measuring yourself against them at all. Their absence becomes irrelevant not because they failed, but because you outgrew the space they once occupied. Seneca captured this perfectly. The whole future lies in uncertainty. Live immediately. When you live immediately, fully engaged with what's in front of you, there's no room for old injuries to dominate. Take action today, not dramatic action, consistent action. Clean one habit, strengthen one discipline, choose one value and honor it even when no one sees. This is how you win quietly. This is how you move on without announcing it. And this is how you make the past lose its power, not by fighting it, but by building a life so solid that it no longer matters who walked away. Before you leave, remember this. The Stoics never sought revenge, because revenge still gives power to the one who caused the wound. Warned that the best answer to injury is not retaliation, but refusing to be shaped by it. And that is exactly what you've learned here. You don't make someone who hurt you feel small by arguing, explaining, or proving anything. You do it by becoming unshakable, by staying calm where they expected reaction, by walking forward when they hoped you'd stay stuck. Your composure is louder than any confrontation. Your silence is heavier than any insult. And your progress is the quiet verdict they can't escape. If this message resonated with you, don't let it end here. Rewatch this video. Practice what you've learned. Carry this discipline into every interaction. Because the moment you stop seeking validation, the moment you master your response, you become untouchable. If you found value in this Stoic wisdom like the video, share it with someone who needs strength right now, and subscribe for more lessons that sharpen your mind and steady your soul. Stay calm, stay disciplined, and remember, nothing diminishes another person more than your complete self-mastery.